All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Village of Mount Pleasant Plan Commission meeting for April 20th, 2022. First on the agenda is called order, roll call.
Bhatia?
Here.
Meyer?
Here.
Driver?
Here.
Hewitt?
Here.
Van Beckham?
Here.
And Bosanowski should be here. He said he was coming, but
Okay.
he might be a little bit late.
I was thinking that was him, it's not. Okay, all right, well then let's move on to the approval of the meeting minutes for March 23rd, 2022.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to adopt the Planning Commission meeting minutes of March 21st, 2022 as submitted.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next will be under old business, ordinance 15, 2022, amending the Code of Ordinances. Sam.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is the ordinance we discussed at the previous Plan Commission meeting to update some of our ordinances regarding business and trade schools. So what we did was split them, as you can see in the table in Exhibit A, into two types of business and trade schools, indoor and outdoor. Where we allow indoor in some of the mixed-use districts, as well as B2, which is neighborhood level business. And then we allow outdoor in only B3, B4, BP, M1, M2, and 3. So only our higher intensity commercial and industrial districts. And then for public, we allowed the outdoor use in a P2 district, which is only in coordination with a larger campus plan that they would have to submit there. So we thought that was a nice split to kind of tackle business and trade schools, ones that you'd commonly see in a smaller office building like setting, the indoor, and then ones that could have some outdoor uses. That's also paired with a change to the code, which you can see on your screen, where we, in the language section, did the split out as well. So, you know, indoor, no detectable noise, odor, vibration, or other disturbances on neighboring uses. Outdoor, we just got rid of the classification that they're general manufacturing and simply said it involve outdoor or work training activities. So that was our solution. We talked about it last week. I think it kind of balances the needs of areas and tries to match them as close as we can to the applicable zoning districts. And with that, so we got on this one.
I do have a question, maybe a just clarification for me. I'm missing something here, but that outdoor permitted now, that's for business or trade schools only and not the industrial part? That's what I...
Correct. Yep. So the definition on the screen in front of you is just for business and trade schools. So the outdoor definition under business and trade schools is only...
Okay, because it doesn't, based on the graph, it doesn't appear to be that way, because it looks like you have indoor and outdoor allowed in M1, 2, 3, both
Yeah,
indoor.
so if you look, there's the kind of skinny row where it says business or trade school. I didn't include the entire table because it doesn't really fit in a good way. But yeah, there's other sub-classifications for like industrial uses that have other outdoor uses lower down on the table. So
Okay.
this is completely separate.
Okay, thank you.
With that, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve ordinance 15-2022, amending codes of ordinancing, allowing uses and divisions, division 90-320 as presented by the staff.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further questions or comments? Any public comment? Then I will call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, under old business, will be Badger CDL site plan application SP 0622.
This is the same CDL testing and training school application that you saw last month. None of the details changed because the issue was the use. So the only real update to the executive summary is in the use section where we talk about ordinance 15-2022, which you just recommended approval of. So the only condition we'd have for this is that the approval is subject to the village board approving the use ordinance that you just recommended. But everything else is the same. Last month, it meets all the landscaping, lighting. Stormwater pond is on the north side of the property. Like we said last month, it'll probably be the nicest landscape CDL facility you see around. So it should fit nicely there and is, next to some other auto-focused uses there on Airline.
Okay.
Quick question in regards to the site plan. Is there sidewalk involved in this?
Yes, they will be required to put a sidewalk along Airline Road, which if you look on
I think I see the little blocks.
screen, yeah, it's that dark line
Okay.
on the top of the screen.
Thank you.
Just a quick question on drafting, Sam. To the extent that the village board approval is a matter of law, is it necessary to make it a condition in our acting?
I wanted to just make it clear so you guys weren't approving this, so it was clear in an approval letter that this was still, a portion of this was still hanging out there until next Monday. So effectively, no. We don't need to include it, but it helps us when we're looking back on the file just to see kind of like the train of thought of how it went through. So
And that's fine, I don't have a problem doing it. It's always good to have things clearly laid out. I was
Yeah.
just curious.
yeah,
Thanks.
what we'll likely do is just hold off on the approval letter. Obviously, applicant is here and we'll see that you all approve it and they'll be able to get started. And then, we'll hold off on the approval letter until the village board meets next Monday and then I'll likely just remove the condition once it's approved.
Okay. Any other questions of Sam or staff? Would the applicant like to add anything?
I'll have the only sidewalk on Airline Road.
Okay. We find that a good thing. All right, if there's no other questions or comments, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the Badger CDL site plan application SP-06-22 as presented.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further comments? Any public input? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Abstain.
Up, we had an abstention?
I abstain.
Very good. Okay. All right, next on the agenda, under new business, is 6840 Washington Avenue Conditional Use Application CU 0122. Robin.
Okay, now my file explorer is not responding. Yeah, it's, I'm getting wheelie at that. Okay, so this is for 6840 Washington Avenue, the Rocket Wash site plan application and conditional use, SP 0922 and CU 0122. Parcel ID 1510322140492, and I'm thinking I'm missing a digit there. The owner and applicant is from Wilcom Development LLP. Comp plan is commercial, local area plan 7, and the zone is B3 for general business. The applicant proposes a drive-through car wash and self-serving cleaning stations on the northwest corner of Washington Avenue and Warwick Way. The parcel currently contains a gas station with a vacant fast food restaurant and a small car wash. The applicant plans to demolish these structures for the new project. The use, which is personal vehicle repair and/or maintenance, is a conditional use in the B3 district. Although we have not set any specific conditions for this use. So like basically any kind of clauses that are specific to this conditional use. Therefore, just the general considerations for any conditional use apply to the site. And those are listed in your packet. Limited employee parking on site, and the site has a triple stacking area. Warwick Way provides access to the site, and the site maintains the WSDOT mandated cross-access agreement across the front of the property. Remember, we had discussed that when we were discussing the Scooters coffee shop development that is next door. The applicant describes the site operations as essentially identical to the Rocket Wash on State Highway 31 and County Trunk Highway C, or otherwise known as as Spring Street, built in 2017. Oh wait, that's a typo. That says SB 2021. That is not what this is. It complies with the land use element of the comp plan, and we don't have a local area plan for Area 7. So just going through as far as the compliance with village regulations, everything complies with the exception of, as you guys can see, the outdoor lighting division and the landscape and screening division. So we'll get to those when we talk about the conditions. So a fiscal note, the property currently has a land value of $2.2 million. The Rocket Wash on Spring and 31 has an assessable value of $2.3 million. So that would lead to a negligible fiscal impact for local taxing jurisdictions. However, the Tsunami Car Wash at 6315 Washington Avenue sold on April 6, 2022, which is just about a week and a half ago, for $3.7 million, which is surprising. That's significantly more than what the assessment value for the car wash was beforehand, or that the Tsunami Car Wash was. If those valuations continue, the assessment could increase significantly. The property fronts Washington Avenue, which is state trunk highway, and the state's responsibility to maintain. The county handles annual maintenance and plowing duties. There's no municipal financial incentive tied to this project, nor was there an ask for one. So kind of just going through the conditional use criteria. I assume you guys read it, so to save some time, staff believes that this particular application meets all of those conditional use criteria. If you have a specific question about any particular criteria, please let me know. The village staff recommends approval with the following additional conditions to meet regulations as to comply with current existing village regulations. Condition 1, the applicant shall remove all upward oriented lighting except for spotlighting of official government flags. 2, the applicant shall revise the lighting plan to clarify the CCT of every outdoor lamp or bulb. No lamp or bulb may have a CCT, which is color code temperature, I think, of greater than 3000 Kelvin. That's classified as, I think, warm white is what that one is. Yep, and those 2 are from our recently adopted lighting ordinance that was a couple months ago. And 3, the applicant shall either submit a landscaping plan that meets the requirements of Division 90-430, landscaping or screening. Actually, there should be no sound. Yeah, there's some typos in here. I apologize. The condition is that they submit a landscaping plan that complies with that chapter. The specific things that are needed in that landscape plan is it needs to comply with the vehicular use screening along Warwick Way, and it needs to kind of add probably 1 tree and a couple of shrubs on the front side, as well as comply with the parking lot screening on the interior parking lot. So the village staff recommend Plan Commission move to approve 6840 Washington Avenue Rocket Wash site application, subject to the recommended 3 conditions, and recommend approval of the conditional use to the Village Board of Mount Pleasant. And also, I guess the other condition would be that the site plan approval of the site plan be conditioned on approval of the conditional use by the Village Board. So, any questions for me? The applicant, I believe, is here.
I have a question regarding the landscaping. Obviously, these are pretty detailed plans before us, and I assume there's been conversation between staff and applicant prior to these plans being submitted. Mm-hmm. Therefore, knowing that landscaping is a real concern of this commission and the staff generally, why don't these plans come to us with landscaping? We're constantly looking at very detailed evolved plans that don't have landscaping, and we're constantly approving things subject to landscaping being done after we look at things, and I don't know why it's coming to us in that fashion.
It's a little bit me. There was a landscaping plan submitted, and that's what I reviewed. However, given the fact that it did not comply with the regulations fully, I actually didn't have a digital copy of it. I just had the big full-size copy of it, that I did not include it into the packet. Given that that particular landscape plan did not comply in those reasons, that's why I did not put it in. So, trust be sure that there will be a submitted landscape plan that meets those criteria. And if I could send something to you, as
I understand it's sort of a chicken and egg situation, and I understand the staff is cognizant of trying to, cooperate and move things along with the applicants, but again, it often seems we're always being asked to trust the staff that down the road there'll be a landscaping plan when it's important to everyone, including us, and I just don't always feel like we're always doing it this way versus staff telling applicants, and I'm not picking on Wilcom necessarily because this isn't the first time.
Yeah. So
Communicate early to the applicants and tell them, listen, you've got to have your landscaping compliant before I go to this commission.
I agree. This is also something that I mentioned to Sam, 2 days ago, that our landscaping code is the most unique and is often what even well-intentioned developers that have access to the full thing will whiff on from time to time. So rather than delay them a month, we basically say, okay, well, we can approve you conditional that you meet these requirements. And if you want to go back and kind of check our work, you're more than welcome to. We can do a follow-up, say this was the plan submitted. If you want to do that under old business, that's also fine. The thing is our landscape code is tough. And a lot of times there'll be some misses and we're all operating under deadlines and whatnot. So we try to accommodate. At the same time, you lead to the problem that you were describing. So we'll try to be better about it above board. This one in particular, there was a whole section that didn't comply. So rather than give that to you guys and then sort of, I guess, confuse the situation or muddy the waters, we decided it would be better left out. So.
But I would point out, given how detailed all these plans were, I mean, this is not a back of a napkin submittal. So it seems to me, even though if our landscaping is somewhat unique and detailed, it should have been communicated, and the applicant should have been aware early enough to at least take a real good shot at complying.
Yeah. I did my thorough, basically what we do is we do our thorough review of plans and stuff like that sometime in the week before when we assemble the packet. That's when we do all the final reviews and then write up the executive summary, coalesce it into a packet and give it to you guys. Yesterday, that was all done on Thursday. The packet was finished and give it to you guys on Thursday. I had emailed the applicant and said, this is what's up with your landscape plan. If you can turn around and get a landscape plan that meets all these in this amount of time, considering the holiday and so forth, please bring it to the Plan Commission so you guys could have a chance to review it. Obviously, that these things take time, and that did not get done. So if you guys want to, take a look at this on the next month as far as part of an old business or anything like that, sure. If you guys trust us to review it, that's also okay. And we can send you the completed landscape plan as approved by staff just to sort of check our work if you would like to.
And maybe that's more of a business, just sort of something to discuss outside of this meeting perhaps, but my initial thought is possibly in these situations, as part of our next meeting, just old business, if nothing more, you stand up and say, by the way, I got the plan, I've looked it over, it complies, and it's available to anybody on the board or commission who wants to take a look at it, just as a follow-up, so we get that sense that it took place. Otherwise, we're left kind of, or at least I'm always wondering, did it happen? And
We can put it under staff review, Tom, but it doesn't always come within the next month.
Whenever it
So,
does
yeah,
come.
well,
But it'll take 2 minutes for you to just say, old business, this is just updating you, I got it, we've approved it, we're happy with it, and then we move on. That would only take a couple minutes.
Sure.
Just
What-
think about it.
We would love to do that. That's fine. We always kind of want to, reward you guys' faith in us by, kind of showing transparency and what we're doing on the staff level. So 100%.
But maybe also kind of give some inducement to applicants in the future that, by the way, there's a couple of commission members who really would like to see this done, and it's not necessarily a free pass that you do it later. We
Yeah,
really
and
would like you to do it up front and not later, because it may mean some.
And I would say that the fact that we're getting it and then putting in a condition and doing it later would be evidence that we are hitting them on the landscape code and we are making sure that they meet it, as opposed to letting things slide. It's not like super difficult or complicated as in numbers, but it's very, it's different than a lot of other localities where it's just, they have to hit a number and that's it. This is position, number, and other kinds of specifications. So they'll get used to it.
And I'm not suggesting, we're letting things slide, or you're letting things slide, as much as I think maybe best practice would be to get it done up front when and if possible.
Yeah, we have a car dealership that's going to be subject to the landscape code very shortly, and well, that's when the rubber meets the road, as it were. Okay. So we'll have a good time reviewing that one. So, any other questions before we get if you want to hear from the applicant, sure. If not.
No, I don't have a question, but I do have a comment, and as the application state is going to be very close to the one that we have on Highway 31 and the Spring Street, and I'm excited because that's probably the best car wash that I feel is in town. So I don't have any concern. I tend to agree with my colleague, like Commissioner Van Beckham, that when you have the landscaping plan, maybe under the old business, just bring it back saying that's what we approved, and I think that should be good to go.
Okay, thank you. We will do that.
Thank you.
I'm assuming, Sam, you've written that down? Okay.
We're going to hear from the applicant, correct? Because I have a question for him.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Come on up. I'm right here. Oh, you'll have to come up here and state your name and address.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Wilcom, one of the principals. My brother Mike Wilcom is actually out visiting car washes in Michigan, so he's not able to attend. But also with me is Mark Eberly. He's the civil engineer from Nielsen, Madsen, and Barber. So any questions you guys have, I'll be happy to answer if I can.
Yeah, the one question I have, Jim, is regards to your letter here that your brother wrote, in regards to contacting Wangard Partners. I'm assuming Wangard owns what's going to be the coffee shop?
They don't. They're selling the property. However, they are the current owners, and they are the adjoining landowners on kind of the north side. The coffee is a little bit smaller.
Okay, but that coffee shop is directly to the west, correct?
Correct.
Now, a question I have, and I don't remember, and again, I probably can't find it anyway if I do have it saved, regards to the layout of that coffee shop. Is there going to be an outdoor ability to sit outdoors at the coffee shop?
Yes.
So that's why I want to make sure that everybody understands that their vacuuming system is going to be right next door to this, and not letting Wangard, the owner of the property, know is one thing, but letting the people who are going to be opening a business that we've approved to have that right next door I have some questions in regards to the noise level, because I like your car wash as well, but it's not quiet.
Well, we have noise ordinances to solve that. So if it rises above the acceptable noise levels, they'll have to mitigate that somehow.
But I hope they're going to do this before such time. I mean, that should be measurable right now, because you have I'll call it the identical
Right.
place right now for it. You should be able to get that and provide that, because, like I said, we've got somebody who's bringing another business in here, and it's going to be right next to it. I've got concerns.
So I guess that's a statement. Do you have a question? Or do you want us to address that somehow? Or I don't know what you want.
Well, I guess I think the statement would be or the question is, are we going to go out and get ask for some information in regards to the noise that comes from that and how disruptive that's going to be to a new business next door? And I don't know how to address that.
Effectively, no. I mean, there's a strict noise ordinance that they have to meet. That's pretty black and white. So if we find that they don't meet it, they don't meet it. My concern about going out on 31 is separating the background noise levels against a state trunk highway are going to be somewhat difficult against the car wash. And we can approximate where the property lines would be between 31 and this 20 site. But to measure it appropriately, we can take some readings, but I guess I also don't know what you'd like us to do.
Well, I'd like to protect the business next door so that if they're, they have every right to have, if we've authorized an outdoor dining facility or ability for people to sit outside, I think we should help protect them from the noise of a business we're going to allow to go in there. That's what I'm getting at. I don't care if it's fencing or, a berm or whatever, but something that's going to mitigate that harsh noise while I'm having a cup of coffee.
Okay.
Were the coffee shop owners notified of this?
I don't believe so, because they weren't the current property owners as of when this thing came out. I have a couple of sort of just general observations. One is that, so the scooters, while it does have a walk-up window because we asked for it, is going to still primarily be a drive-through operation. I don't have any sort of qualms about that. The walk-up window is basically designed to serve probably the high school students in the area, and so the surges of high school students are before school, during lunch, and after school. And I am not an expert on when people do their car washes, but those times, which are basically 7 a.m., noon, and 3 p.m., are not exactly huge car wash times. I'm just guessing that. They can clarify that a little bit more. But those two sort of crowds won't probably oversect that much. And the other thing is there is a grade difference between the coffee shop and where the gas station sits. The gas station sits about maybe 6 or 7 feet higher. And so with screening and bushes, or even if they decide to do a masonry wall or something like that on that particular side, and I don't know that yet because they haven't completed the landscape plan on that particular side, that would basically reflect the noise and either push it upwards or push it backwards to not affect the coffee shop below. Does that sort of answer your questions, or at least address some of the concerns? We can certainly look at more into it, but there are certain things about the setup that lead me to believe it's not going to be that big of a problem. What I was concerned about was the direction and opening of the actual mouth, because we've gotten complaints about the Tsunami car wash because the fans, the exit of the car wash points towards the residential areas, and that is very loud. This one, the exit points north, or no, that is south, towards State Highway 20, as opposed to any of the other directions where there are other businesses.
Yeah, and again, that's my concern is just the side where the vacuums are. Again, the blower is one. I get that. And Jim, I would assume that you probably have the noise, the decibel noise from this equipment. I would think somebody has that as to what it, because you had to meet our criteria before.
Right. In 2017, there was concern because of the neighbors and close proximity to our development on Spring and 31. So we did have studies done. We did get the decibel levels. We have all that information, and it passed at that time what your restrictions were. I can also say that the technology has advanced since we built the one in 2017, and the blowers are now actually much quieter than they were in that current wash. So even better news. I haven't seen the plan of the coffee shop. My brother probably has. I don't know where that building is or how the proximity that is to our building, but if it's where the existing building is, that's probably 200 feet away. It's a good distance.
It's a bit between.
No, there's no building, right?
There's no building.
It's
where-
empty right now, yeah. It's the fenced-in area that's sitting there.
Okay.
Anyway, I think it's something that should be looked at. I just think it's becoming, to be a good neighbor, again, and the fact that the people who are purchasing the land have not even been notified. That's the other thing that's concerning, that they wouldn't be able to come here and at least ask questions.
We notify the property owner. It'd be up to the existing property owner to notify whoever they're selling it to. So, we try to be very careful about the legal notices that are sent.
Well, again, the reason why
I understand your concern, Joe. I guess what I'm asking for is, do you want to add a condition to it? Like, I understand your line of thought. Like, what do you want to do about it? Like, how do you want to address it through the approval process? Do you want to table it? Do you want to add a condition? Do you want us to do some investigation and come back? Do you want to look at a more strict landscaping option on the west side of the site? We're open to anything.
And I have that information, the decibel levels. I can send that over to Sam and you guys can review it.
Well, I think just for myself, driving by the one on 31, it meets our standards, but it is noisy. I mean, in your car, you can hear it at the stoplights. And so that's my concern about the coffee shop. Have we had communication from them? Are they going forward with that plan?
Yeah, we just got a signed permit application today.
Okay.
And the reason why I bring it up is because the letter states that they contacted the neighbor, and the neighbor doesn't have a problem, but the neighbor is not going to be the neighbor. That's where the issue comes.
Sure, and really all that is doing, so we send out legal notices, and then we ask the applicant if they've talked to any of their neighbors, and to just send us notice of what they've said to their neighbors. So there's not a requirement that Wilcom has to go out and talk to any of their neighbors. They just said they did, and so we provide you that information. So, again, do you want to table it? Do you want us to come up with like a stricter screening option on the west side of the parking lot? Do you want us to look at some sort of fence or wall situation for the length of the
neighboring building,
vacuum?
whatever? Yeah, we can talk, again, I don't know what our options are. You're telling me I can't.
You're setting a conditional use. Like, I mean, if it's related to noise, I think it's an applicable thing that you can set a condition on a conditional use. So as long as it doesn't go so far above and beyond that it's like unreasonable, you can set something.
I'm trying to come up, and I don't know enough about the decibel levels or whatever at the next property, to landscape to the point of bringing the decibel to X, what, I don't know what those are.
Yeah, and I mean, we could estimate it, but even then, separating out the background noise from the readings that we take on C, on the comparison rocket wash, and then estimating how far they go down. I mean, you're approaching the limit of our technical capability. None of us are like audio engineers. So, I think your options would be likely some sort of increased landscaping or some sort of opaque fencing on the west side of the property in terms of actual solutions to noise, if that's a concern.
And again, but I don't know what the number to give to achieve X,
I mean, it just has to be below a certain amount in the eyes of the municipal ordinance. So if you're going to hit, 40 decibels or something, it's probably an unreasonable level because anything next to 20 is going to be fairly loud regardless. So my guess is it's probably not good just to set a specific number because you may never be able to hit it next to 20. My guess would be if you're worried about noise from this specific operation, some sort of screening in between the properties makes the most sense.
So I have a recommendation as far as that it's concerned. So we have vehicular screening options, A, B, and C, on Washington and Warwick that they have it right now. Then the A on that is no wall and a lot of shrubbery. B is basically a 4-foot tall fence, opaque fence, and a 5-foot sort of gap and some condensed shrubbery. And the C option is a masonry wall that's 4 feet in height. I would say recommend that you could say along the west side of the property that they choose option B or C in order to sort of sound block. A completely opaque solid fence would certainly sound block it because you already had a height disadvantage. This is lower, and the fence would go up another 4 feet, and so that would probably deaden the sound a lot. That would be my recommendation of something that's already in the code that can be applied to this one particular area. And I would also sort of condition that on as far as the conditional use criteria. I would basically just say that is you're asking for that in order to satisfy for you conditional use criteria 1 and 3. That is enjoyment, diminished enjoyment or value in the area, and health, safety, and general welfare. So you would basically say you want them to basically apply that screening requirement on the west property line.
Jim, you mentioned that technology has improved. Is that on the fans inside the wash or the
Yeah, the noisiest
vacuum
part of the wash
stations?
is the dryer system, and that's the part where the mouth of the car wash faces out towards Washington Avenue. And it is directional, so it shoots that direction because it's the mouth of the wash opening up. And that technology has advanced to the point where they've got that decibel level down from the
The
from
vacuum
2007.
system
Yep.
and stations are the same then as what would be on Spring Street?
They have advanced the vacuums. I haven't seen any numbers on how much quieter those are, but they have changed the motors in those so that they are quieter. I just haven't seen any numbers.
Just to clarify, we're talking about discussing the possibility of fencing or screening only for the length of the vacuums. We're not talking about the entire, anything more than that, correct?
Well, I will mention this, there is an easement on that side of the property for the power company. So we're not allowed to put any structure there, or, they didn't even want trees there at one point. So I guess it's not as easy as, I guess, it's throwing up a wall.
What's the width of that easement between where you propose to stop your work and the property line?
I don't know if, Mark, if you
Yeah,
have the.
it's a 10-foot easement for power, 16-foot easement for wire blowout, and a 25-foot tree removal easement.
So as shown on your plans, your vacuums are about 20 feet from the property line, does that look about right?
Yeah.
And you can't put any screening or fencing in there?
It's not to say you can't. We'd have to review the actual easement docs to see what they are and aren't allowing. I think Robin's solution is good in that if you just identify some of the options in the landscaping tables, we can work within that and then review the easement documents to choose the option that's legally allowed and most applicable. Work with Nielsen Madsen to do so. So that would set standards that you guys are going to be followed, and then we'll just apply the one that's most appropriate in light of the easement. If that makes sense.
Now, you said option B is option B is a combination of fencing and deciduous or whatever?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
And then option C is like a full wall. Option A is landscaping only. So it goes from like only landscaping to full masonry wall, and B is kind of half and half. But instead of a wall, it's more of an opaque fence. So B is probably the most applicable
Yeah,
in this
I
scenario.
would agree. I think it would be the nicest looking as well.
Go ahead, John.
Robin or Sam, have we had any complaints about sound at the current site?
The current mobile site, like this
No,
current
the-
gas station site?
Of where they have the car wash now?
On Spring
Not,
Street.
not on the one on 31 and 11. Or
31
sorry, 31 and C.
C.
I mean, that's at the corner of a county and a state trunk highway, so I don't know who'd complain about noise there. So it's
Well, I'm
about
just saying
as
the
loud
fact
of a
is
corner as you can
there's
get.
residential closer to that unit than there is to this new unit.
I mean, you can certainly hear the car wash, but probably by the time you're on the opposite side of the street, it's mostly just background noise by the time you get to those property lines. We have gotten complaints about the tsunami car wash, as Robin has said, but the blower faces directly south there. So this is sited a little bit better. We are actually very careful when reviewing this to make sure to not repeat our mistake last time, because we've gotten, particularly one neighbor, some repeated complaints down there. And there we did install like some screening on the building blower system, and still, like, it technically meets our code, but they still complain. So, this doesn't make that mistake. So I think the noise coming out of this one will just kind of mix in with the 20 corridor probably a lot more. And if we can screen the vacuums on the west side, I think you'd solve any issues that you have.
Well, I guess I was just kind of aware of the fact that we've not had any complaints at the current Rocket. And I can understand the tsunami one because of the proximity to the immediate house to the south of that and everything. It's like from here to the car out here in the parking lot, as far as the distance there. And this one has not got any comparison to residential or anything. It's all pretty much business or highway are right around in that area.
Yeah, the only complaints I remember of ever getting the one on 31 and C is regarding the lights. I think part of that was just, it was a complete redo of the block, so people kind of had to get used to it being more commercial in nature. The other thing is our new lighting ordinance, I think, addresses those pretty thoroughly as well. So I'm not concerned about that at all here.
I'm not guessing that we're going to have a problem with it, so I don't have any problem with it.
Yeah.
Ram?
Again, I'd like to add my comment that as much as it's a good discussion about the coffee shop, if you look at the technology, I totally agree with Jim that because in the motors and the drive field, that was my background, so I know that the technology has changed exponentially, so it's very quiet. As far as the noise is concerned, I think looking at the plan, I think there's more noise coming from this, like Washington Avenue from the traffic than is going to be coming from here, because even the direction is coming toward the 20. It's a good concern. I think I like the solutions proposed by the staff, but I'm not as concerned because of these reasons that I think overall DV level is more dominant from the traffic from the Highway 20 than it'll be from here. And it's not in the direction of the coffee shop toward the west, it's coming toward the 20 toward the south. But any solution which can mitigate that as proposed by Robin, I think it should be considered in the landscaping plan or, what we talked about earlier. So I'm not as concerned, but I think what Robin proposes has a merit to look into that when they present the plan. But I'm not concerned about the noise as much as my other colleagues are.
Any other comments on this? Concerns?
It's just, we're all sort of anticipating the coffee shop has a problem with this, and we just don't know. And I realize it's considerate of you to think of them, and we might be anticipating a problem that doesn't exist, but I can't say it doesn't either.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate they're not here, because if they cared, but we don't know whether they know about it. At the same time, I agree 100% with Sam. We should not start sending out notices when we're not legally required to, because that's a troubling road to go down to, because then you're damned if you do and damned if you don't on the next situation, because you did it once before. I guess I agree with the general sense of putting this back in the lap of the staff to see what they can do within reason and within the constraints of the property and everything else, because I think it would be tough for us to fashion much up here that's detailed.
Right. Well, and I think as Ram just brought up, you have to submit a new landscape plan anyway. At this point, I would encourage you to do that and include what you want to call the option B from the code into that landscape plan. And again, you don't have to do it, I guess, but it's just, I'm trying to be a good neighbor to these folks who we've approved a business, and they, again, I'll never sit out there drinking a cup of coffee, but I know a lot of people will, and I'd like to be able to, have them be able to run a business without the noise. And again, it's not just the vacuums; it's also the music in the cars that are sitting there idling while they're vacuuming. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in a car wash vacuum station, but I'm just trying to be considerate of somebody who we're trying to welcome to the village as a business person, and be cognizant of what I think is they're going to be concerned with when this thing opens up. So
I think if you are willing to craft that into an extra condition on that and just give us a little bit of leeway to say, or similar reasonable screening or something to the option B, because we don't know how that easement language is going to play out. I think that gives us enough latitude. We know your direction after this conversation, and I think the village board would be comfortable with that as well.
Can I suggest that rather than that Sam or Robin articulate that condition for us to then
I was going to ask that. Thank you,
Take a
Tom.
crack
us
at it?
stumbling through it.
Is there, Sam or Robin, is there any way that notification could go to the coffee house folks so that if they had issues, they could possibly in time modify their site plan to allow seating on the other side of the building or something?
That's a tricky road. I can reach out.
I know.
Yeah, I can reach out to Vanguard Partners and just see if they've passed along that information for our own benefit, but that's all I would be able to do.
Wait, did you said Weingar still has the property? Who asked for the sign permit?
So you can have an applicant and a different property owner. So we often get applicants on behalf of someone anticipating and lining up, with material shortages and stuff.
Okay.
Yep.
They'll line stuff up in advance, get it permitted, and then come through when the property transfers. The one thing I would caution about that is the coffee shop has gone through all their civil approvals and everything, so modifying their site plan at this time would require going through the whole process again.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I like to agree with what Sam said. I think to go back to the coffee shop owner, I think we are blowing this out of proportion for two reasons. Number one, right now in the gas station there is a car wash that's opening toward the west. Mm-hmm. So actually, if you look at from the technical point of view, you're changing the direction of that exhaust from the west to the south. So that should actually help.
There is a car wash there, but it's
Right.
very tiny, and honestly, the pet wash portion of that, it probably gets more use. There's this little dog bath
Correct.
place in the front.
But at the same time, and now I'm going to speak, from my experience, because as an engineer, I dealt with the dB issues, the noise issues. I think if you take any codes or whatever the requirement is, my guess is the incremental delta of dB is not going to be as much as, incremental from the traffic that we have on that. So I think what we talked about earlier, I think it should be considered in the approval or the review of the landscaping plan, but beyond that, I think we are blowing it out of proportion.
Okay. I see it both ways. I don't have a problem either way, so if there is anyone who wants to try to put a motion together?
On that happy note, I'd like to make a motion to,
I didn't really add what the get condition was, unless you want to skip it. But I was gonna say, just the suggestion of as that be to say, condition that the applicant add vehicular use area screening on the west line of the property, option B or C, or another option that staff deems appropriate.
I'd like to give the option to staff, to review their plan, so you can word that the way.
So that would be an added condition.
Yeah,
Okay.
So I'd like to make the motion that Planning Commission move to approve the 6840 Washington Avenue Rocket Wash site plan application SP-09-22, subject to the recommended conditions and recommended approval of the conditional use CU-01-22, modified as presented by the staff to the Village Board of Mount Pleasant.
I think that covers everything.
Well, the only thing it didn't cover is,
You should add the landscaping to be completed. in-
I would suggest that we could just modify the third condition, which is already requiring the landscaping plan, correct?
Well, we've
And
got
it just-
a motion, so.
I know,
if we-
that's what-
If we can have a second, then we can
Okay.
pick back
I'll
apart.
second Ron's.
Okay, we've got a second,
I-
go ahead.
That's why I think I was trying to word the motion that as presented, as suggested by the staff when approving the site plan. I'm kind of a little bit vague over here because I like to give them the latitude,
Yep.
but I don't want to have a specific word that ties their hands.
Okay, and I think, Robin, do you have something you want to read that back to us, what you would propose there as that condition? Or off the top of your head, what you were talking about?
What we're talking about is the applicant shall submit a landscape plan that meets the standards of section 90-430.
Yep, that's right here.
And as well as adds vehicular use area screening option B or C, or whatever the staff deems appropriate along the western property line.
And that's my motion.
That meets, okay. That meets everybody.
Lisa, do you have that?
Is that an if necessary condition? I mean, we don't know for sure that this is gonna cause problems for the noise. Are you, are we saying that we definitely have to put up a fence? Because we'd rather do option A, the landscaping.
Yeah, I mean,
I guess I'm just asking, we don't really know which way it is, and if we reach out to the neighbor and find out if this is an issue, or we look at we do decibel readings and we find out that it isn't gonna be an issue, that the traffic is actually noisier than the vacuums would be, is this gonna be a condition I'm required to do?
usually, yes. That's how the sort of conditions work. I mean, right now, there's also, you already have to do this on the Warwick side because that wasn't submitted. I don't know necessarily how much sort of wheeling and dealing that can be done here, and that could be up to staff or whatever, but I could see also some sort of easing of the requirements along the Warwick side, which is basically just pointing to a bunch of other similar uses in order to get that screening on the side adjacent to the coffee shop, but that's really up to either the Plan Commission to do that or to empower the staff to make that decision.
My motion modification, if I have to make it, it will be to give the leeway to the staff. Because we meet here once a month, and number one, you don't want to hold the business, and number two, I don't think anybody is expert here, and I think it has to be, as I say, I'm concerned that we're going to blow it out of proportion. The traffic, the noise that is being created by the noise on the 20, I would be very surprised if the delta or the increment of the noise that we are talking about is going to be that measurable even. So I would like to give a leeway to the staff that when you approve or when you review the landscaping plan, be aware of that if there's an issue, that you deal with that.
Second's
Appropriate.
okay with that?
Joe?
And again, it can be A, B, or C. If staff can work that out with the Wilkums and saying, hey, this is appropriate, or if there's room to put that in, again, that's the biggest issue I think we're talking about here, is because you've got that easement there. Putting a fence in doesn't take much room, but when you start putting in trees, they start spreading, and obviously that then encroaches on the whatever the power, whatever they have, they need to be able to get in there and remove something. They're going to have to tear trees down, where a fence, if it's on your property, you're okay. So I'm good with that being, to the staff, that's fine. And it can be A, B, or C, whichever, and it's the most, if it's, can be done with trees, great. I would rather have it that way.
Okay, well, it sounds like that, Robin, that you meet the criteria that we were looking for, so I
Right.
think we're good on that. And the second's good on that. Okay. Any other discussion? Any public comment? No? Okay, then at this point, I would call a question. All in favor?
Aye.
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 I abstain.
Opposed? Oh, okay, we've got one abstention. Is there a specific reason for the abstention?
I'm in a new business,
Understand?
a relationship.
Understand. Nothing further. Very good. Motion carries. Thank you, Jim. And then this will be going to the village board. What's the date on that, Sam? Monday.
This coming next Monday, there's a board meeting.
Okay. All right. Next then would be 2701 Oaks Road Site Plan Application SP 1222.
All right, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the applicant applied for a 7,000 square foot test building on the northwest corner of their 75-acre property, the corner of Oaks Road and Durand Avenue. The facility covers an existing parking area on the site. The site plan complies with the comprehensive plan land use designation, and we do not have a adopted plan for local planning area 16. In terms of Chapter 90 base district standards, this is M2, accommodate moderate intensity manufacturing, warehousing buildings where it takes place primarily within the building, which this does. This meets all the M2 bulk zoning standards. There is a shoreline zoning overlay. However, the building structure does not lie within 75 feet of the top of the nearby stream bank for the shoreline zoning. The M2 district allows general manufacturing uses by right. This does not comply with the parking and access Division 420. The site plan does not show the required pedestrian internal connections between the buildings per 90-420.70D. That's condition number 1. In terms of condition number 2, outdoor lighting, the F3 luminary does not meet 90-425.301. The applicant shall revise it to meet the 3,000 K maximum CCT requirement. I think there are 4,000, so they just need to bump it down slightly. In terms of signage, there wasn't any, and this does meet the shoreline setbacks, as we said before. This application is subject to review and approval procedures for site plan review in front of you all. The property currently has a land and improvement value of just under $8 million. It lies within tax increment district number 2. As a manufacturing facility, the state of Wisconsin assesses the property. This will bump up the assessed value of the property slightly, but it being a 7,000 square foot building on a site with like a 500,000 square foot manufacturing facility, it won't largely affect the value of the property. We don't have any additional staff considerations, and we just have the 2 conditions for approval. 1, the internal circulation system, and then 2, the revising of the lighting to meet the 3,000 K maximum requirement. With that, we recommend approval. Pretty straightforward. I can answer any questions on our end if you have any. But anything over, as a reminder, everything over 5,000 square feet comes in front of you all, so this just met the standard to not be administrative on our end.
Just a comment that I get from your write-up that we really can't impose much in the way of landscaping, given the nature of the property already and its manufacturing, et cetera. But to the extent there's somebody here representing Case, I would, from my perspective, view this as an opportunity for you to do some landscaping. You're going to do construction. It would seem to be an opportune time to do something. And given the proximity of the site to the road that hundreds of people drive by every day, I just encourage you to do something appropriate and beneficial for everybody's sake, including, it makes your site look better. I'm also amazed that your property's assessed at $8 million in a car wash is 3-point-some million dollars. I don't know whether I want to buy a car wash or a plant.
Somebody's probably getting a deal in that.
Although the state assesses you, so we really can't take a swipe here.
Yeah, the state assesses, and manufacturing personal property has come down over time due to subsequent changes in state law. So that, due to some state level decisions, perhaps the
It's
assessed
okay,
value.
Sam, you
on-
don't have to cover for
Yeah.
anyone here.
I blame them. But yes, to Tom's point, if the applicant would like to install some landscaping or revise some landscaping plans, I would just recommend that they reach out to us because we can tell you where your money would be most valuable. If you ever redo your parking lots or anything, it'll kick in anyways, so we can happily tell you where to spend your money and not waste it for future repavings or have to install some now and then rip it out and install stuff in a different place later on. So if you guys want to do it, just reach out to us and we can tell you where.
Sam, have we required them to use case equipment to do any of the work on the property?
That's not my purview. Nothing in the zoning code there.
All right, good. All right, any other questions or comments? Any public comment other than what we've had here? No? And I'd look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move to approve, the Plan Commission move to approve the 2701 Oaks Road Site Plan Application SP 12-22, subject to the recommended conditions for approval.
Second?
I second.
Motion and a second. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, next will be International Drive Certified Survey Map Application CSM 0322.
The applicant here proposed splitting the existing 45.7778 acre parcel into two lots, one that's about 22 and a half acres and the other one that's just over 23 acres. Both lots will have a 390,326 square foot industrial building, which you all approved in SP 0321 last year. This complies with the land use element of the comp plan and adopted plan for local planning area 11. For 74.6, we made a note that the applicant should show some existing sanitary sewers and things on the CSM. They're actually going to provide that via a separate survey document to us due to the scale of the site. The surveyor said it'd basically be unreadable, so we don't want that to be included. So we'll get that as a separate survey document. So I believe that is condition number 1. I would recommend you all strike it at this time. For number 2, per 74.6219, the applicant shall revise the face of the CSM to show isolated natural resource areas as delineated and mapped by sewer pack. There's one directly to the south that kind of goes in the old rail corridor there. We've provided that mapping information to them, so they should be able to revise the CSM that way. For design standards, the application meet the ordinances. For required improvements, the application meets those ordinances. For Chapter 90, which are zoning standards, the applicant must provide a revised landscape plan for the central truck parking area per the SB 0321 approval letter, and we were actually working on that this morning, so they're getting that underway, and we should have that revised landscape plan shortly. In terms of a fiscal note, we don't have any. This doesn't really affect the taxable value of the property. It's mostly a financing decision to split the property on their end. So 2 conditions recommended, number 2 and 3. Well, we'd recommend striking the first condition in the write-up. With that, we recommend approval. If you have any questions, I can answer them. Gary's here from Ashley. If you
Any questions, anyone? Pretty straightforward. No? Then a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the village staff recommends the Plan Commission, that we move to recommend approval of the International Drive Certified Survey Map Application CSM-03-22 to the village board, subject to the recommended conditions.
Second.
just 2 and 3, correct? Conditions 2 and 3. Do you agree that we can strike number 1?
Recommended condition 2 and 3.
Just clarify, in terms of recommended conditions, I'm referring to conditions 2 and 3 as set forth in the staff's report.
Thanks, Tom. Perfect.
Okay. And we had a
Okay with that.
second?
Yep.
Second's good, all right. Any further discussion? Public comments? I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
I abstain.
Okay, very good. Abstention there. Motion carries. Very good. And thank you for your patience.
Gary,
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
see you, Gary.
All right, next moving on to ordinance 1622, amending the Code of Ordinances, of the Village of Mount Pleasant for accessory uses. Robin?
Yeah, so I remember when Sam and I told you guys that we would only be amending the zoning code twice a year, stuff like that. I'm sorry, we were inaccurate. That we catch stuff fairly frequently, and we try to bundle it together on an otherwise not as busy month or anytime we're also doing other zoning code text amendment updates. So we tossed this one in. I recommended this one get tossed in because we were doing the next one on electric fences, and we also did the one earlier about the truck school. So this is a very simple one, and actually is kind of brings the code back to what it was. So we have 3 classes of home occupations, type A, type B, type C. Type A is basically you do your home occupation and no one from the outside world would ever know that it was there. You are a tax attorney and all of your clients are online or mail only, and you have a personal office in your home. No customers, no nothing. That's type A. You sell stuff on eBay. You guys get it. That is type A. That is allowed by right. No permit, no nothing. You can just do it. Type B is sort of like a limited thing. Basically, it's you and either one employee or one client. This is most likely referred to as client-based occupations. Say, my wife is a psychologist, so if she wanted to, quote, hang a shingle, as the lingo goes, and see patients out of the home, it would be under this designation. It would be, the practitioner and the client and no one else, no parking, no signage, no anything like that. Other things is educational tutors would fall under here, any kind of training, and one-on-one sales, like appointment-based sales. Like I know of a gunsmith who has a federal firearms license and does basically specialized antique firearms work. Kind of cool, but it's a client-based system. And then the last one is rural home occupation, which is landscaping, contracting, plumbing, all that kind of stuff that's more outdoors. So you almost have like an A, B, and C system. A is by right, C is a conditional use, and this code had B as a conditional use. And then it specially calls out that tutors is permitted by right. Under the old code, this class was basically done by a staff level permit, or it was called a residential home occupation permit. I think we still have technically that designation on the files and stuff like that, which would basically be a staff level review. Staff basically thought that in order of intensity, it went no intensity, very slight intensity, high intensity, and so the level of approval should match that. A conditional use for a tutor or psychologist or whatever seemed a bit too much, so we scaled that down to a staff level permit. That's it.
How did you come up with 4 students? Or
That-
four individuals?
That's Kirk had that when we redid the code. I
think that the general idea is that something that small for students would likely not be noticeable outside. Like if you're doing multiple kids are taking a piano lesson at once or something like that, probably not going to notice it. But once you got to draw the line somewhere. Once you're at more than 4 kids, it starts turning into kind of a larger operation where you might have set aside things or, 3 or 4 parent cars coming in at once, less carpooling, stuff like that, or less siblings taking the same lesson. So you draw a line somewhere, and 4 is where we chose.
Yeah,
basically.
If someone had 5, we would do.
Yeah, family-based daycare operations cap it at 8. And this is sort of like a little bit different. It's a tutor situation. So like if you're a hairstylist, you can have 1 person there. If you're a tutor, this allows you to have up to 4 students. So that is a sort of exception carved out for just educational tutors.
Go ahead.
I was just going to mention that my packet doesn't include the Exhibit A that you're referring to. Do I understand that Exhibit A is what's now up on the screen?
Oh yeah, it's an entirety. Well, I mean the entirety. I printed the entire home occupation section, and if you guys didn't get that, that's on me probably.
I have it.
Okay.
Did not.
Yeah, I don't have it either.
This is literally the only change in
bad
code
copy.
right here is on your screen.
I'm okay with proceeding with the screen. I just,
Okay.
for the record, want to clarify what Exhibit A is. So, go ahead.
Yeah, so, and the other thing that we're adding as far as this goes that wasn't on the original residential occupation is basically a signature acknowledging that they have read the regulations of this section. Which is the most important part, is saying, okay, you can and can't do this. And so if they end up doing something like that, we know that they knew. So.
Okay, I do have a question, because this is type B. You're saying you guys are still going to review somebody who's requesting a permit, assuming? Okay. Because the reason I say that is music, there's piano music, and then there's trombone, and there's drummers. And if somebody tells me they're going to be next door and they're going to be teaching drumming 8 hours a day, I would have a problem with that. Because, and again, we have a drummer in the neighborhood who's learning how to play the drums, and I can hear him. And again, I'm sure it doesn't pass any code. It's not, I guess would say, decibel wise, it probably doesn't, it meets the code. But if you had a drummer next door, above grade, all day long, you'd hear it.
Yeah,
So that's why I'm saying when you start, how do you review that kind of stuff? Because that can get rather obnoxious, actually.
Well, I'm going to have to find a new location for my drum school.
I have actually never heard of a drum tutor. I mean, I just assume they just like bang on the drums all day. Like that's what they do.
All he's doing is drumming up business.
I think to seriously answer your question, Joe, what we
Yeah.
try to do is look at, is this an activity that we think would generally be noticeable to an outside, it does meet the sections of the ordinance, and when reviewing it, does this meet kind of the intent or other sections of the code, whether it's repetitive noises or things. It's not just the decibel level, there are a little other things. Is it something that someone could do in their normal home without a permit? We'll probably say it's okay because, if your neighbor can do it without a permit for personal use, teaching it to one other person in your house is not really any different, to be honest, from our eyes on a village-wide status. But so it's things that would be difficult for neighbors to ignore, such as if they were doing it outside or if they had a specific studio space that was not well insulated and visible or things like that. Then we would push back on or say you need to locate this in the basement instead of in your sunroom or that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, again, it's one thing, a neighbor can pound on a drum, but he's not going to pound for 8 hours. But if he's teaching and he's got a student every hour, that can be,
Well, up to 4, so it could be a drum circle school.
oh, yeah.
No.
But yeah, we review each on its individual merits and kind of put it under the criteria that's established in the code. For example, the firearms application, as I mentioned, They're not allowed to discharge firearms on site. They have to apply to other ordinances in the code, and that means no shooting. You don't get to test it out or anything like that. You go to some place where you're allowed to do that.
I just don't want you guys getting trapped, because once you approve it, if under conditional use, you can now take that away, where you're not going to be if it becomes approval without the conditional use, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think with these kind of permits,
Or are you going to be actually be giving the conditional use?
No,
Can you do
conditional
that?
use is a state statute related permit. We can't issue them at a staff level because there are specific noticing requirements called out for conditional uses. That said, there's some debate internally on whether we could revoke a conditional use, like just in general. So it may be a moot point unless you have a specific condition that we can revoke it. So.
But it can be revoked once that particular person, that doesn't transfer. That's the one thing that doesn't do, right?
It's for the specific use. So if the use continued, you could continue it. Like if a business got a conditional use for a car wash and they just sold the car wash to someone else. So it's use specific, it's not owner specific.
Okay.
So yeah, unless you or like the zoning board of appeals put on some sort of owner specific condition that held up.
And certain staff level permits can, like if they have a permit for, this and they're violating the terms, they will get violations, and that permit could be revoked. We would basically consult with the legal staff here at the village in order to do that. It would be pretty far along the line. But yeah, this level existed a long time ago, before Sam and I either of us were here. So we caught this, and it was like, okay, that's a little bit too stringent for what that type of use is. We don't need to bring it up to you guys and take even longer to go through planning commission. So
And there's nothing in here that signifies indoor versus outdoor.
no, but I mean the outdoor one is all of those kind of uses. That's all going to be in rural home occupation, which they need estate lot residential or above in order to do.
In my previous life, at 36 years as an independent insurance agent, we had it much easier to figure it out. Do you want your house insured when you have the pianist come for lessons or not, period? And then you had to pay an additional $50 or $100 or whatever it was at that time. But yeah, we covered same situation in teaching in homes and things.
Yeah, my sister-in-law is she's a composer and a piano tutor, and this is in Virginia, and they had to actually go for a variance for her to get, I think, be able to teach piano lessons. It was just absurd. They got it, but ugh.
Some of this is us looking at these types of uses and thinking, could people do this, and are they doing it anyways? And
Yeah,
are they
they
just
are.
ignoring getting a permit? Like, we'd rather them submit a permit and we know about it than they not want to go through a conditional use process, ignore it, and then it becomes a problem down the line. I mean, it's a little bit more black and white, but us getting a permit, we can kind of mitigate that stuff a little bit more proactively and just make it less painful for people. Also, in a lot of the zoning code stuff that we've talked about, one of the things that's becoming more popular are live-work type applications. So us looking down the line as people, particularly during COVID, have moved some of their businesses more into their house. We don't want to stand in the way of people living in Mount Pleasant being able to operate their business in Mount Pleasant, as opposed to taking their business and moving it to a different community. So just trying to be a little bit proactive on that end as well.
Well, Sam or Robin, I think you can say no, you don't work there anymore either. S.C. Johnson, a lot of times, let all their employees, a number of their employees go home. Northwestern Mutual did the same thing during the virus, and a lot of people were working with their offices and everything at home.
Yep, all that would be under type A, which wouldn't need a permit to do.
But they probably never did it. They probably let their employer automatically extend coverages for that while they were working at home.
Sure, I hope so. For us, we would never really think that somebody would try to I mean, a couple of times you get people that want to cross the Ts and dot the Is to kind of try to see, do I need a permit for this? And we're just like, no, you don't. So, but yeah, that's the intent, to kind of stagger the level of approval for the level of intensity appropriately.
Okay, I think we've beat this one enough. Is there
Beat that drum.
a motion?
Does it need approval? Okay.
Yay, nay, is there more hesitation or questions?
Well, this one says accessory uses, and this one says home occupation. What is, this is the ordinance 1620-2022?
Yeah, accessory uses is the top level, and then under accessory uses is home occupation.
Okay. Well, I'll make a motion to amending Code of Ordinances, Village of Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin, Division 90-33 for accessory uses, to approve as written.
Second.
Motion and a second. Anything further? No? Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And then we've got ordinance 17, 2022, amending the code of ordinances for the Village of Mount Pleasant for fences and walls.
All right, so now we get to the actual one, the complicated one. Sam and I discussed the stuff that was on tap for you guys today, and there's like, except for this one, everything else is smooth sailing. Shouldn't take but like 2 minutes.
So it's just gonna be the opposite then.
Here
So
we
let's
are at
breeze right through it.
223.
Yep. So this is amending ordinances about fences and walls. So this is a lot of content, so bear with me. On March 18th, 2022, the governor signed into law 2021 Wisconsin Act 197, a measure concerning battery-powered electrified fences. Senator Wangard, Fayen, and Jagler introduced the measure. Representatives James and Cabral Guevara co-sponsored it, and it passed out of committee with bipartisan and unanimous support. The text of the entire act is as follows. I would just kind of summarize that this the text allows for electric, battery-powered, alarmed security fences in any area that is not deemed exclusively for residential use. I will kind of go into this in a little bit. So you read all that, and it's also up on your screen what the act says. This act preempts local municipal authority to regulate fences in the above cases. Current Mount Pleasant ordinance states as follows. It says that no electrified barbed wire, razor wire, or any type of fence designed to cause bodily harm is allowed in any district, except that the community development director is authorized to approve such fencing in A2, M2, M3, or P2 districts subject to an administrative site plan approval. So basically this act says you, the municipality, cannot regulate this type of fence unless X. And I'll get into why X is tricky while we're going through here. Village staff are concerned with the wording of the act because staff believe it unintentionally allows electrified fences on most lots without a permit. The staff consulted with Village Attorney Smith, who agrees that the phrase designated exclusively for residential use is unclear. The act does not clarify who or what does the designation of exclusively residential use. The village contextually defines residential use differently in the zoning chapter of the code and ordinances, the comprehensive plan, and the village property assessments. All three of those are things that we can classify something as residential use, and all three are different. By any of those definitions, the village does not designate any property exclusively for residential use. Any residential property can have a home-based occupation, as we just discussed, or grow a backyard garden, commercial or agricultural uses respectively. Any R-zoned property can have a family-based daycare, chickens, a bed and breakfast, a short-term rental, a church, or have a public civic building on the property. RE zones explicitly authorize some agricultural uses. Mixed-use zones have even more complications when thinking about exclusively residential use. Village staff believe that under the new statute, a property owner could erect a battery-powered armed electric security fence in any of the situations above without a permit, without notifying village staff or anybody. The village board enacted the village ordinance prohibiting fences that cause bodily harm in most districts with public safety in mind. And the staff believe that preventing those fences in areas where citizens live correctly balances the protection of private property and the protection of neighboring property owners. The staff are particularly concerned with the law's potential to allow battery-powered armed electric security fences in areas that may have neighboring children or disabled populations. The act does say that the security fence does have to have a 5-foot regular fence in front of it, but normally we require a permit for a fence now. So would we require a permit for a fence that has to be installed to have a fence that doesn't need a permit? It's very confusing, and we don't get this, like why the authors decided to do this, but we found a solution. So the village staff, along with the village attorney, recommends an ordinance change that mitigates the worst possible outcomes of this situation. Act 197 clearly intended not to allow electrified fences on residential properties, but the vague language of the act leaves open multiple loopholes. To correct this ordinance officially designates property exclusively for residential use in relation to the state law only, to the act only. This designation would not affect zoning, comprehensive plan, or assessment statuses. The designation would apply to R-zone properties, MX zone properties, any B-zoned properties with residential units, and any property where residential is a legal non-conforming use. It also applies to any area within 50 feet of a property line of any of those properties so designated. So we recommend the approval of this ordinance. So, yeah, questions on this one?
Can you start from the top again?
Basically, the state passed a law. I'm going to do TLDR. The too long didn't read. State passed a law saying you can't pass a law that limits electric fences. We think the law is poorly written and doesn't actually do what the law sets out to do and prevent them from being established in residential areas. So we make a law that establishes what those residential areas are, which coincidentally basically allows us to regulate electric fences in exactly the same places that we regulated them before.
I think Senator Weingart just stopped outside. He should be inside in a minute.
I hope so.
I've got some extensive comments on this because I think, although I agree with you, the statute's not very well written, and I agree with you, there are some concerns about public safety. I disagree with you that the village attorney and the village staff can basically decide they don't like a state law and write an ordinance that says basically rewrites the law and says it means something else. The state indicated use verbiage, which is property designated exclusively for residential use, which tells me the state really wanted the area that you can't put an electrified fence to be a pretty residential, purely residential site. Your proposed language says, well, we're not going to do that in the village. We're going to expand the verbiage of exclusively residential use to mean something that it doesn't mean. You've included within exclusively residential use to include business districts. Well, that's not exclusively residential. You've expanded the definition to include mixed use. Well, that's not exclusively residential. In fact, you even go so far to extend it to 50 feet from any property line, so you're extra expanding it. So even though the site where somebody wants to put up an electrified fence is exclusively commercial or industrial or has nothing to do with residential, if it's within 50 feet of residential, you're going to call that industrial space exclusively residential because of who's next door. So you don't have the authority. You, the village, do not have the authority to do what you're proposing to do. I know my legal opinion differs from your village attorney, but I think it's pretty obvious on the fact that we can't do what you're asking us to do, and we shouldn't do it. And I think the public concern that you're worried about, again, I realize there's a bad situation when somebody could stumble upon one of these fences, but the state says there has to be a 5-foot perimeter fence before you get to the electrified fence. That seems to me to mitigate a lot of these concerns about a toddler walking up to one of these electrified fences, because first he's got to scale a 5-foot fence. But again, regardless of whether you think your solution's a good idea from a policy and public safety, and I think you can make that argument, I don't think we can do what you propose to do. You're just ignoring the state statute's intent and language and saying, well, in Mount Pleasant, we're going to define the state verbiage to mean something that it isn't. And
Okay,
that's my
all of those
concern.
are great points. I 100% see where you're coming from. I think the problem lies in the state statute.
Yes.
And as long as the problem lies in the state statute, we, Mount Pleasant, have to do what we need to do to basically protect our citizens. I think they use the word exclusively way too carefree there. And because of what, as I said, any residential lot in Mount Pleasant can be used for something else. We have had court cases where the tax designation of a property an entire property had to get switched to agricultural because they grew some cedar trees in the backyard. And so that is sort of what those are this kind of judicial precedents about use that we're concerned about. So that if somebody has a tomato garden in the backyard, they can say, there's agriculture on this property, so it's not exclusively residential use, so we're gonna erect this fence. The other problem is that we have a fence permit statute. And if we require a fence permit to put up the 5-foot fence before you put up the electrified fence, that would be illegal under this law, because that would basically render it subject to a permit to put up that electric fence. And the vagueness of the statute of saying designated by what? Exclusively residential use. So we're basically taking the step of defining that and saying that this is what we designated. I think the spirit of basically disallowing it where people live or near where people live is basically what the spirit and what I believe the law intended. We're not trying to mush it in anybody's face or anything, but I think
you're stretching it you're being very generous or expansive to yourselves and saying, well, we're going to define it how we think they should have written it. You're not saying that we're going to, for instance, looking at your proposal, it's one thing if you're going to argue to me that A1 should apply, property zone residential. Maybe I'm willing to give you that one. But as you go into property zone mixed use, that's a stretch on your part to saying, well, we're going to apply a residential concern to mixed use. Then you keep going. And then you take it out to B1, B2, B4. Well,
if they have residential components to them.
and again, I'm willing to maybe consider that one. But boy, you go to B4, you're going down to 4, and then when you go to 5, you've gone too far for me. You've really gone too far.
So It would apply to the property line, as it were. If you basically accept 1 through 4, then the property line of that R district would be a no-go. You wouldn't be able to put it on the property line. And what I thought about that was, well, is there any functional difference between 6 inches back from a property line and the property line? So that's why I basically categorized it as 50 feet. Because we do have setbacks from residential areas in our landscape code, which says increases setbacks of manufacturing uses or harmful uses from residential things. So that kind of like jibes with the landscape code as far as increased setbacks from our zoned properties. And I mean, I understand that this seems bold, but I've checked with our village attorney, and I've also sent this to the vice president of the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, who also stated vehement opposition to this, and unfortunately said it got past them, and they thought that this particular interpretation and let's call it definition, if you want to go by that way, is a decent stopgap solution until the language of the law gets clarified. We just don't want electric fences being erected in subdivisions. And I don't know necessarily, this was something that I was really upset about when it came across my desk, and I was just almost to the point of, hey, just ignore it. And you know what? Lots of localities are just going to ignore it. And they're just going to go about their day enforcing their fence codes currently written. We're even talking about this because your staff is up to date on this sort of stuff and thinks about them and thinks about solutions and whatnot. I mean, our solution might even be the model solution for every municipality in the state that wants to deal with this. So
Worst case scenario, I mean, say it gets struck down, someone challenges us to court, we lose, they get up to put up their fence. We have severability clause in the zoning code and the code of ordinances. So then just the parts that would be illegal as determined by judge or the Supreme Court or whomever would just not apply anymore. And if they fix the law and further define a residential use, then we'll update our code because we're watching the statutes that go through. So to us, there was only upside in being bold because A, who's going to call us on it? And B, if someone does, we got to change. Our ordinance does not comply with state law, so we have to change it regardless. So we might as well change it to what we want. And if we get knocked down a peg, we'll change it to what a judge or the legislature says we have to. But while it's vague,
yeah,
I just have a problem with that philosophy that,
I mean, Wisconsin's a home rule state, right? This rubs us the wrong way on a lot of different levels. So, yes, maybe we are fighting a little bit of a battle, but Wisconsin theoretically gives home rule authority to its incorporated municipalities. Them writing specific rules for electric fences because someone wanted to allow electric fences in areas and they were worried that municipalities might disagree. I understand the state legislature has that authority, but it goes against the spirit of home rule across the state. So I don't lose an ounce of sleep when we are bold in defining their poorly written laws until they tell us differently. What do we have to lose? A court case?
Robin, what indication did you get from the league? Anything?
The league informed me that they were really opposed to this law, that this law was
Opposed to the one the state did?
The state.
Okay, yeah.
They were opposed to the state law, and they were kind of remiss that they missed it in sessions. The only sort of lobby that spoke on against this, as I said, it passed flying colors all
Through the state?
through the state, Democratic, Republican, all that sort of stuff. The only locality that spoke out against it was the city of Milwaukee, because of that it's an entirely almost urbanized area, and so that these could show up in particular places. So I read it, and that was the first thing I thought, was that there's the exclusive residential use part. While I think it's clear, I think taking it literally is what's wrong with the law. So we are defining it to what it should be and what a reasonable person would define it as residential use is basically people living on or near the property. Now, you notice that I did not say agriculture, because people do live on agriculture and have dwellings on agriculture. So AG1 and AG2, they are exempt from, like, they can do this because we've established that, I mean, well, AG1 wouldn't have been able to before, but we're letting that go because if you have animals on the property and you want to protect them from the coyotes and whatnot, and that's fine. But we passed it through legal. We talked to the league, and the league thought that this particular, like, you could call it a workaround, you could call it a clarification, you could call it an abject rejection or whatever, is probably the right thing to do because they didn't spend enough time on this in the oven. They didn't put enough time into it.
Do we assume that the league went through their two attorneys, their staff attorneys, and rendered, some information back to you from that way? They
have not. So they were focused on a lot of the other stuff, like the multifamily, like in every commercial district, state preemption. They were really concerned about state preemption this legislative cycle. It was real bad, and this one slipped through the cracks. They almost are always opposed to state preemption of municipalities because, duh. And so they are looking at it, and they will probably put out advice about this within the next few weeks as they kind of review it, with their lawyers and whatnot. Meanwhile, I would talk to your state senator.
It's seldom that legislation in Wisconsin passes with bipartisan unanimous support and signed by a Democratic governor, and yet staff and the League of Municipalities seem to almost treat that as, well, it slipped through the cracks because we didn't pass upon it, and we didn't critique it. Well, I think the fact that it passed bipartisan, signed by the governor, means we should be giving more deference to this legislation as opposed to treating it as more of a reason to ignore it because our league didn't pass upon it. I just really am having problems with the approach and the mindset of the village and our attorneys to be kind of viewing it as up to them whether to do a pass around, and that's, I think, what this is. And the other thing, I guess, if you can address, is the 12 volt. I mean, how dangerous is this, a 12-volt fence? I have no idea. I don't know whether this is going to kill me, set me on my butt, or just give me
Curl your hair.
nothing more than I plug I don't know. So do you, as you've done this workaround, have you determined that 12-volt is truly dangerous to the public?
It's never the volts, it's the amps that always is what usually kills you. And where it goes through, like if it goes from your hand to your hand, you're fine. But if it goes through your heart, that could be very bad. I agree. This is bold. We don't normally do things like this. But this was actually a certain thing that crossed the desk, and it's like, well, what do we do? Because as you've talked about, the language is clear. It went bipartisan or whatever. But then we had to decide, well, even if we went about it completely straight, the definition of what is exclusive residential use has to be defined, because it doesn't say zoning code, it doesn't say comp plan, it doesn't say assessor. So which definition do we use? So we'd have to establish that. And then it also establishes, who sets that, like who can, organize that. So our interpretation is that it's you, the Plan Commission, and the village board establishes that. So either way, we're going to be defining what they mean by this, I think, because there's no other way around it. And, and sometimes, like stuff, everybody agreeing on something doesn't necessarily mean that it's amazing.
Well, I agree that somebody has to designate the definition. And I agree that this commission and the board are the appropriate peoples, and I just don't agree with the way you've defined it. You've gone too far. You've gone well beyond exclusively residential in your definition. That's my final take on it. And
Okay.
I don't want to keep everybody here any longer,
But-
kind of
Well, let's just say
repeating it.
1 through 4, you're a little bit better with than 5.
I'm probably good with 1 through 3.
Okay.
But that's not what's before us, and another option here would be, well, I don't know how, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I think maybe some further thought on your part, because no one's asking you for these fences today. So I don't know that we need,
I think that's another problem with this is with this law, we would never know that they don't have to ask us. They would just put them up. So
but I can't put up a 5-foot perimeter fence around my property without coming to you.
currently, yes, that you wouldn't be able to do that. But under the guise of this law, it would also could basically take our fence permit law and toss it out the window too. Because if somebody just says, well, I'm putting this 5-foot perimeter fence up in order to put an electrified fence behind it, then we technically wouldn't be allowed to regulate that via permit.
But how does that play into our 3.5 height? in the
That's another
ordinance?
thing. Can we regulate a 3.5 height fence, which would then deem the 5-foot height illegal, which would deem the electrified fence illegal? Do we have the authority under this law to say that you can't do that? I think we would lose that unless it was defined as something else. Because if I'm, growing tomatoes in my backyard and you say this is a 3.5 foot fence, you can't build any higher than that, but that's regulating. That's preventing someone from putting this around their entire property, which is problematic in our view. And at the worst case scenario, we've discussed it with the village attorney, and he said we're not going to necessarily pay. He gets paid a salary, and he would take this, to circuit court and see how it goes from there. Sometimes people miss, I think.
Sometimes a little pushback is good because, like I say, I think we've probably spent more time on this than the legislature did.
I think that's exactly right. And the other thing is, if this sends a wake-up call or a flare saying, hey, you should probably define this or change this language a little bit, and lets them know, then we've all achieved a good thing, and they can have a better law next legislative session too.
I guess that's my question, though. Why wouldn't our attorney do that now? Why wouldn't they push back now and say, wait a minute, we've got an issue here before we jump to doing something that, as Tom's saying, hey, we're going against state law here. Why are you putting us, and again, I know we're protected because of our legal people, but why wouldn't our lawyers push back now?
Standing. You kind of have to have a case, like there has to be a situation where something gets denied or approved because of it in order to actually have a case to move up through the courts.
You can't put something, so you can't put a hypothetical together, a case to have them go back? I don't know the law, so I can't, but it's like.
the simplest thing seems to me to be for the league to start being more proactive, find the time to do what they should be doing, of going back to the legislature with an amendment.
Correct.
And in the meantime, we should table this proposal on your part to see whether the league and the state can.
I just don't know why. Like, what do we lose? Like, by adopting this, what?
The principle, Sam, is that you can't just knowingly write a law that undercuts a state statute. That's why you
Then
can't
they
do
should
it.
write a better state statute, is my answer.
And
Fine.
if we did do something, that might force them to react and get it corrected.
It's not our province. It's
I
not
think-
our
I know.
authority to.
I think going through the courts is probably a lot easier solution and is going to probably yield a solution more than getting the league to lobby it, because this was expressly written to subvert local authority. So they're probably not going to listen to the league on it. And the fact that we are a municipality under the primary author represented by the primary author of this bill, I'm sure would get some attention as well. But and so the thing is yeah, it needs to go to court, and there has to be some kind of standing to do that. So it either basically has to be somebody that sues us because we told them no, or we basically have to have somebody sue somebody that put up an electric fence and were hurt by it.
Well, has anybody from the village contacted Weingart or other reps to say, "Okay, can you reconsider?"
That is outside my purview. I don't. We're
all citizens. Any one of us and anyone in the village can contact the state senator and say, hey, by the way, something happened, we think you should readdress it.
Sure, but they're out of session for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Like this, we have to worry about everyone putting up a fence permit this summer. The legislature's not going to convene unless in a special session until 2022, or we're in 23. So what do we do in the meantime? I don't think the governor is going to convene a special session of the legislature to deal with a crappy fence law.
No, because they may find other things they want to change. And he doesn't want to have another
I mean,
special.
the last 6 special sessions by the legislature were just convened by the governor and immediately gavelled out of too. So it's not like the legislature has a recent record of going into long special session.
I agree with Tom that this is really vague, but I can't help believe that maybe it was left intentionally like that for municipalities to interpret it the way we're doing it.
I think that's charitable. I think the less charitable definition is they left it vague to allow them in places where it read as if they weren't allowed in residential areas, but they were writing it so they would be allowed in other areas. I mean, it depends on how cynical you are. Right. I go more with the second option. I think they wrote it vague to specifically allow it in areas that maybe they knew people wouldn't be happy about, but maybe you're right. Maybe they did write it to say,
They had to believe.
Go ahead,
like this
municipalities.
was going to cause a lot of lawsuits. I would think they had to be looking at that and saying, this could cause a lot of problems down the road. Or did they just, did they just leave it to the municipality to interpret it?
we rarely read through the public testimony record of state statutes and stuff. We're reading through it because it's pretty short. The record, I'm vastly paraphrasing here, but basically says, we think this is a good idea and we think people won't have a problem with it, so we're going to adopt it. And then I think the voting record shows that they all kind of thought the same. I think we run into this a lot. So I think it's worth the discussion here in that in TIF law, in other zoning laws, in other state mandated reports, they write stuff vaguely because whenever they're doing local preemption, they almost have to, because they have to make it applicable to specific classes of cities or all cities and villages or all cities, villages, and towns, as in this case, So, I think our issue is always where the rubber hits the road. We've created entire TIF districts in the village to basically, I'm not going to say get around the law, but butt up right against allowed uses in specific zoning districts and things like that, because statutes were written 30 years ago and the market has changed and uses plat differently and residential looks different, all that kind of stuff. So that's why I think long and short of it, why we feel comfortable pushing back on this is this is in our eyes it is a vague law. Charitably, they wrote it to let us define it. But
vaguely doesn't give you carte blanche to write it to mean something that's totally different. To say this is an industrial property, but we're going to call it residential because it's 50 feet of a residence. That's not.
Then make a motion to strike
rewriting
the
something.
last section, Tom.
Fine. I'm prepared to make a motion. I just don't know whether we're at that point or not.
I don't know if anyone is still on the fence or not.
Put a battery on it, we'll find out.
What is anybody feeling? Are we looking for a motion, or do you want to discuss a little more, or do we want to what?
I guess as much as I like to discuss more, but the problem with the discussion is, number one, when the state passes a law, they probably had, for all the legislatures and the senators and governors, they probably, each one of them has their own attorney. That's the way the system works. So it already has gone through hundreds of attorneys, and our attorney and our commissioner attorney. So I guess to me, we cannot, if we leave it alone, then what Sam and Robin are saying, then we are accepting the state law which is approved as it is, and then deal with that if there's any accident or if it goes to the court. But to Tom's point, by defining now, so the bottom line is, the state law does not exclusively
Excuse me,
define.
we have a visitor outside.
So the state law, I know we saw that, and he's the one who was pardoned by the president. That's why he's enjoying his freedom. So the bottom line is, what I heard is the state law does not specifically define or is vaguely define what is residential property. So what the staff is recommending to define that, correct?
Yeah, and everything that we define
Right.
as residential has a residential component or shares a property line within a residential thing. And I set it up as a feet from it, so that particular property, if it sets back enough, they could still have it. As opposed to saying that if it borders it, it just can't have it at all. It says that it has to be set back a bit from it. So
Again, so what I heard is that the problem is, or the league define the problem that the state law does not clarify what's a residential property, and by the proposal, our staff is defining that. So I don't have problem with that if I look at it from that point of view. My question is to staff is, are we the first municipality in the whole state to take the lead?
Absolutely.
And in that case, we would be the first one to be challenged?
Well, maybe.
If you do, damn if you don't.
Only if somebody requests electric fence.
But if we leave it the way it is, they don't have to request it, they do it.
Right.
yeah, it would be somebody would put one up, someone would complain, and I would issue a ticket for them to take it down, and then they would sue us. That would how that would work out. Otherwise, the other legal challenge is
Yeah.
somebody be hurt by one that was
Yeah.
erected.
So,
I mean, for better or for worse, this is what you get when you have Robin and I as your two planners on staff. So we're bringing a lot of code changes to you on a monthly basis, but you're also going to, as we've caught up effectively with fixing some of our old codes, subdivision, zoning, we've gotten through them all. We're going to have more of these conversations because we're going to run up against stuff that's recently passed, and because we're on the front end of staff looking at it. I mean, the other one is the city of Milwaukee, who's probably the largest planning department of the city in the state, right? So, yeah,
one way would be, if we don't do anything, let's just say that we don't do anything, and so the state law is what state law is. If somebody wants to put a fence and you don't approve it, then they go to the court, correct?
That would be under the current ordinance,
Right.
but
Yeah. So then, one way would be then, either way, it could be challenged, so let them go to the court and then let the court decide who's right.
We're right.
this particular method would have a lot better chance of surviving in that court than our current code as written because of what the preemption language is like. So that is, it uses the Act's language of exclusively residential use and designate to do exactly that.
So from the planning commission and the village board, if I put the hat as the village board, which one is a?
Oh, they're gonna have fun with this too.
Yeah, I know.
But we're a forward-looking community.
I can't say for sure we're the first one to kind of do something about this, but I mean, if we're not the first, then we're among the first three. The league, it didn't really have much they were saying, we'll get back to you, other than the fact that they were completely against it.
Okay, let me ask again, and maybe it was discussed and with the other discussion, I missed that. does the league has any recommendation to all the municipalities at this point in time to do it one way or the other?
No.
No, Robin was the one that gave him a heads up that this law passed.
Yeah, because the reason is that if the league doesn't have any recommendation, then obviously it's up to each municipality. But if they have it, I'm just kind of thinking it loud, because knowing that even if the league had some position, because the legislature is not in session, nothing is going to happen for at least 1 year, assuming they agree.
I'm not necessarily a betting man, but I would think that their solution would probably be modeled on something that we did here. It seems the more kind of obvious way to address this. It also is the way that you would comply with this code, because how would you comply with it? Like in the full, like sort of its intention, how, like, even we wouldn't be able to say, okay, well, what is exclusive? We would have to define it anyway. Sorry if I'm rambling a little bit there, but
No, but to a point, to Ram's point and to Tom's as well, why don't we, as a village, you, two, and our attorney, present this to the League of Municipalities and adopt something through each of the, that's agreeable to everybody in the league, right? And that way we're all standing on the same footing, if you will, instead of us going one way and the next village down the road writes it differently, but they've got 6 points. And the other one's got 7. You know what I'm saying? It'd be something that, this is your definition, this is what we agree that this would actually work.
I sent it to the league already for review. They have not gotten back to me. But knowing the league, they would want to leave it up to each individual municipality to decide what levels and where they would want to define it. And
Set a precedent.
yeah, well, I mean, set a precedent that it could be done and defined, but it's up to your municipality to figure out where that is. It's going to be different for Raymond than it is for
Yeah,
here,
that's
and
true.
all that sort of stuff. And ultimately, it does go back to Sam's point that it does have a severability clause. If something were to be challenged and then lose, the rest of it would still stand on its own and comply with the state ordinance.
So what you're saying is this recommendation, these 5 points, is recommended by our lawyer here.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, from my perspective, the ones that I could live with, that I think pass muster under the state statute, would be your provisions A1, which is property zone residential, and your number 4, which is a property that's actually being used as a residence. I think those two comply with the state statute. Your numbers 2, 3, and 5, I think, are beyond the scope of what the state intended. So I, for one, would be comfortable passing something with A1 and 4, but not 2, 3, and 5. I'm just letting everybody know where my head's at. I mean, I'm not making that as a motion right now, but that's what I think
Okay,
could
I
pass
think-
muster. And then at least we've done something, and I think that would protect the truly residential areas from the worst-case scenario without taking it too far.
I think this is our opportunity to say, hey, this law is not a good law, and here's what we suggest. And I think if we do pass this, it would bring to the attention to Vanguards and Vanguards, the other ones, that they need to address it.
Maybe they
And
don't
that
know,
gives them time to do it in the year when they're not doing anything else.
they're legislators.
I mean, you mean
They're not
every year?
experts like these guys.
Don't put words in my mouth.
Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Wait, I want to give deference to Tom and his thoughts. I think it's worth making, in this case, a separate formal amendment motion, if you don't mind, Tom.
Okay.
Just so we can get where your heads are at on whether you want to adopt the whole thing, the thing in part, or not at all. So we can kind of get Tom's amendment formally voted on and out of the way, instead of negotiating a friendly amendment as we normally do when you're all
Okay.
on the same page.
That makes sense.
That'll give us a more clear record for the village board as well. And then whether that passes or fails, vote on the ordinance as a whole.
I agree with that. I think Tom makes a great suggestion. Maybe we should have a motion on what, 1 and 4? And then the other one maybe as a separate, because 1 and the 4 are no-brainers kind of thing, right, Tom?
I think they're pretty clearly within
Right.
the state, yes.
Right.
I don't want to say no-brainer, because that's a little,
And then perhaps that's a good solution, that we make a motion to recommend approval, adding the language 1 and 4, and the other one, maybe we can use that saying is that the planning commission recommend that we go back and discuss with the state or the league or something like that.
Let's just go line by line.
Yeah.
Just
Or
go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
or
and then that will
line by
go to the
line, because
village
it-
board.
Yeah, because,
that makes sense. Then everybody gets a chance to pass on each one if they want it included or not included.
right,
I think
exactly, I
that's
like that
a good idea.
suggestion, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
How do we phrase that? I'm sorry,
just gonna
Sam.
Yeah, that's like not a thing. What by Robert's rules should happen is Tom should, or someone should make a motion amending the ordinance to only include the specific subsections that you want.
With it being understood that any other commissioner can then make a supplemental or a secondary motion including additional.
Well, it includes all of them now. So what you're doing is
Okay.
taking them off, the ones that you don't want. So you should vote on,
But what
you
I'm
can
trying to
amend
establish,
each like one. So if you're going
if
line by
I say
line.
motion to approve 1 and 4, and that 1 and 4 are adopted, does my motion then exclude the others, or is it then still open for
The
additional?
way the ordinance is written is all 5
How
are
about-
included now, so you'd have to remove
Sam.
2, 3, and 5.
Could we then do a motion to approve
Three,
the whole
four.
thing as well?
If you approve Tom's motion, you would remove 2, 3, and 5.
Okay, so then it's only one motion, it's not one plus.
Well, but
I guess
Robert-
what I'm trying to do is
You
give
could
the-
make a separate motion to remove each individual one that you didn't want. So you could say, motion to amend ordinance to remove line 2. You could vote on it. Then you could do another amendment to the ordinance to remove line 3. You could vote on it. Or you could pair those, say, I want to remove 2, 3, and 5. You could vote on it. It's whichever way you want it, but you're removing lines from the ordinance as written and presented to you.
But I'm trying not to box in my colleagues to the extent they want to include something else. So if I pass 1 and 4, does that allow them to continue with a second motion to include?
Yeah, I think we're trying to go for ranked choice voting here, and I don't think it's we could do it via Robert's rules. So I think you would basically, the way Sam was just saying is, we vote each individual to exclude whatever you want to exclude, and if it fails, it fails, and then we move on.
So, Tom, what you're saying is, I don't want to include number 1, for example. Do you all agree with me? Yes or no? You vote on it.
Okay,
Then move down to 2. Do you want to exclude number 2? Yes or no?
so we'll phrase it that way as a motion.
Yeah, that would be the cleanest.
Makes sense.
Are you ready to do that?
Yeah, is that fine with you, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman?
absolutely, absolutely.
Then shall we proceed then on that basis? We'll just do them one at a time. All right, so, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the amending Code of Ordinances that we,
So right now, Tom, you're just amending the ordinance,
Yeah.
the proposed ordinance. So first, you're all going to vote on all the amendments that you want, and then you're going to vote on the final ordinance. So all you have to do is move to amend the ordinance to remove sub 2A2, if that's the one that you want to remove.
You got to name what you,
Okay.
the ordinance though.
No,
is.
you don't, because he's just amending it right now. You're just amending the proposed ordinance before you vote on the whole package as a whole.
all right,
So you're just voting on the amendment.
then I'm going to make a motion to amend the proposed amending ordinance to adopt Clause A1, any property zoned residential, to exclude A2, any property zoned mixed use, to exclude A3, any B1, B2, or B4 zone property to include A4 property including current residential use, and to exclude A5, the provision for 50 feet from any property boundary.
That works. Do you want to vote on them separately or as a package?
I think we agreed separately.
Separately, I
Okay.
think.
So you would call,
The chair calls what type of vote he wants.
I would call for a voice vote, individual roll call vote.
Roll call. All right, so for number 1,
Okay,
roll call.
no, but hold on, we only had a motion, we didn't have a second yet.
Oh, sorry.
You're
Yeah.
right, we have an amendment. Okay, do we have a second on that amendment?
I'll second the amendment.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Now we can do roll call.
All right, Bhatia? This is just for 1, to clarify. So
Just
any
for-
property zoned residential would be included.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
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 All right,
motion carries.
for number 2, any property zone mixed use. Reminder, voting aye on this removes it from the proposed ordinance, okay? So Bhatia,
Aye.
Meyer,
Aye.
Driver,
No?
Hewitt,
No.
Van Beckham,
Aye.
Bozanovsky.
No.
All right, that fails, so 2 is included.
Okay.
3, any B1, B2, B4 zoned property that contains dwelling units. Bhatia?
What
Aye.
happened to, what happened?
So voting aye removes it.
Yeah, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Now, wait a minute.
No, I don't want, you,
It doesn't remove it.
I don't want
Leaves it
something
in.
removed.
If you don't want something removed, then say no.
Okay, can we start the roll call over again, please?
Sure. Bhatia?
Aye.
Meyer? Driver?
No.
Hewitt?
No.
Van Beckham?
Aye.
Bozanovsky?
No.
All right, that also fails.
That's
So
3
that
and 3.
3 is included. Number 4 is any property including where a current residential use is non-conforming, assessor, blah, blah, blah. Bhatia?
Aye.
And this is to include, so I is
Yeah.
yes, it stays. Meyer?
Aye.
Driver?
Aye.
Hewitt?
Aye.
Van Beckham?
Aye.
Bozanovsky?
Aye.
And finally, number 5, 50 feet from any property boundary of any of the above the following 4 that you just
By
voted
now,
on.
we better have our ayes and no under control, number
So-
5.
I removes
Aye.
it. Meyer?
Aye.
Driver?
Aye.
Hewitt?
Aye.
Van Beckham?
Aye.
Bozanovsky?
Aye.
All right, so you voted to approve 1 through 4 and remove to number 5. Okay?
Okay.
Now, you can make a motion and approve the ordinance recommendation to the village board as the amended ordinance.
Do we have a motion?
Yes, I make the motion to recommend to the village board amending the ordinance as we just approved.
Perfect.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are we good with all that, everyone?
Who did second?
I mean,
I'll work it through with Lisa. No
yeah,
case.
Lisa,
Is there a motion and a second? No further discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Opposed?
Opposed.
1 nay. Okay, motion carries. Wow.
Little did you know you'd get to today on such a
Right.
small agenda.
Wow.
Yeah.
We don't have anybody from rec today, right?
Right.
Yes.
I am from rec
All right.
today,
So
John.
we're moving on to staff reports.
It's George's name is on here, that's why I said that.
I have the honor of being your George today.
Okay.
George is actually on a well-deserved vacation right now, so
Good.
just a brief update on Campus Park Phase 2. If you've driven past, you can see that they're putting up, the trailer and starting to, get electrical and everything marked and out there and fencing and all that kind of stuff. So they have started in earnest. They will pick up speed in the coming weeks, and you'll see grading start to happen first, followed by utilities, and then going down the line. So the village board approved your recommendation for the full alternate bid package. That budget amendment will be up next Monday, but for all intents and purposes, the village board has approved the increased budget as you all recommended. So it will be a very nice park, and it'll be under construction very soon. Just a reminder, we're keeping the pickleball courts open. However, the playground will close as needed throughout the project, so just keep an eye out, or if anyone asks you, please let them know, you can still go to the pickleball courts, but please pay attention to the remaining areas of the park, and if they are closed down, to respect that. I shouldn't have to say that, but people broke into the pickleball courts because they were so excited. So please don't bring your children to the playground as large construction equipment are actively next to it. Even though kids love that kind of stuff, please watch from a distance.
They're not a part of the play equipment.
They are not part of the play equipment, as cool as they do look. So that is your update for Campus Park. We expect it'll be done in the fall. Exact date obviously depends on the weather. So we will do some sort of opening kind of ceremony when the park is done, but it'll look very different if that's September versus November. So we'll just keep you apprised as the summer goes on, and we also we'll post updates to the Village website, Village social media, all that in the coming months. So any questions on Campus Park?
$4.5 million.
5.1
Or,
million.
excuse me, with 5, that's right, with the other stuff. Yeah.
Yep, 5.1 million, all said and done. That includes some strategic plan items that we talked about with the Village Board on Monday in their annual strategic plan meeting. For instance, the pathway through to Smolensky Park and some other things that have been long-term goals for the village. So you are all accomplishing something that has been on the docket for a good decade, at least at this point, even longer.
Since we moved here.
Correct.
Seems like we should have more car washes to build up our tax base.
Well, you now know how much they're assessed for. Get busy. You got an in on chemicals, let me know. But yeah, that's what we have for Campus Park. Everything else, rec programs will start in the coming months. So keep an eye out for that, and hopefully we have a good weather this summer.
Good deal.
All right, next we're gonna skip to me. Robin has some stuff on local area plan 5. But just a brief update for you all. The Community Development Department has grown once again under direction of the Village Board. The Village Board hired or approved the job description for a Community Engagement Manager position to help with both the internal and external communications in the village, everything from social media to websites, branding and identity, the strategic plan preparation and presentation at the Village Board every year, and everything else in between. After a hiring process, we hired Lisa. So congratulations to Lisa in the back, who you've seen.
Good
so
job.
We love an internal hire and promotion, and she's really excited. So you'll see her work in the coming months as she just gets her feet under her. Monday was her first official day in the new role. So if you or anyone you talk to has any questions or ideas or things that they would like better communicated with the residents, please let us know, and we'll make sure to include those things. Even if it's just like a lot of people ask me about, this specific park or this specific playground or what the hours are over here. Anything like that, please send it our way. We'll make sure it's communicated. So that should be great. And then we also have under her a new hire as well that will be helping her in those roles as well. So the village is going really from 0 to 60 in terms of communication efforts in the coming months, and hopefully you'll see that and be happy with it very soon. And that lives under community development for a reason. That is, we try to be, as we had a long conversation today, the most proactive department in the village. Probably the one that deals with residents more often than any other department other than the police department. So, this is just part of our long-term strategic positioning of community development to include things like parks and recreation and assessing, building inspection. We should be proactively being in residents' homes and helping them accomplish the things that they want to do in a safe and healthy manner. So community engagement will be a part of that.
Excellent.
Trustee Bhatia.
I have one question and one comment. Actually maybe 2 comments. As you know that at the village board, I had pretty strong feelings about the position, and I approve that, I like that, and my strong feeling was this is the 3rd attempt to improve the communication, so I am I look forward to see that. And in the past, I have heard from the staff and many other people saying, well, we put that on the website and this and that. As much as you like to believe that in this day and age, everyone looks at the website, but the critics, who oppose you on everything, they don't look at the website. So I would certainly hope that under the communications, I'm not going to be looking at the Lisa because I'm going to be looking at the community director. Is that I hope that we toot our own horn. We tell the people, we tell the community what good things are happening in the village of Mount Pleasant. Beyond the website, maybe a article in the paper every 3 months or something like that. But my point is, I like to see us tell the community where the tax dollars are going, how we're spending it, what good things are happening. We have a lot of good things happening in this community and nobody knows it. All we know is negative things. So I really look forward to that. And my number 2 comment is, with all the discussion that we had about the state law and this position and the village board, is the village of Mount Pleasant so blessed to have you guys, or does everyone have people like you?
I thank you.
Let me comment on that first, because I was going to bring that up as well. I want to talk about a comment you made that you apologized to us that you were burdened with you two, but I have been to enough planning commission meetings statewide and national to see who their competition is and who is running these other villages. You guys are superior all the way through.
Yes.
No question.
Yes.
We thank you for your compliments. We hope you forgive us when we bring you 45-minute discussion items on newly adopted state laws. But it's just part of being that proactive. I certainly do not discount the other planners. I really, truly put that back on you all and the village board, in that we are only able to be this proactive because you all trust us to do so, and the village board gives us the agency to adopt those ordinances. And that trickles down through administration with a great boss in Maureen, good coworkers and the other department heads and our other managers and village staff here at the village. So it truly is a team effort, and without the support that you all provide and the village board provides, we look at a lot of other planners who sit and just stamp permits all day because they don't have the agency to do anything else. So thank you for trusting us to actually try to make the village a better place and not just tell us to, go back in the office and approve sign permits all day. So we appreciate that very much. With that, I'll turn it over to Robin as we get into neighborhood planning.
Excuse me. Could you make some comments about our meeting the other day with staff as far as the purpose of that? When we had the meeting in here?
The strategic plan meeting?
Yes, yes.
So the village department heads present their sections of the strategic plan every year. I think we've come and shared those with you in the past. I'll probably bring those to you in May now that that strategic plan has been presented to the village board. So we presented that on Monday. It's typically the first meeting after an election, as we have a new trustee on the board now. So we talk a lot about our goals and objectives through the strategic plan. It's everything that we talk about. It's growth opportunities, neighborhood development, quality of life, parks and recreation, communications, providing good quality services. So I'll be back next month with the specific goals and details for the next couple years, but we did present that. Those recordings are available online, and we'll hopefully have a pretty mock-up for you. I think maybe we can get Lisa up to actually present some stuff next month from the strategic plan. So.
And that meeting even went longer than proposed too, so don't feel bad today.
Hey, you all get $35, so you can't complain too much.
My check is in the mail?
Exactly.
You get one.
I just want to say, thank you for your kind comments on us. Sam and I definitely have good times working here because we get to engage that and stuff like that. And the thing is we just had a debate and, back and forth, and people disagreed with some of the things. That's what you guys are here for. And thank you. Because if you guys didn't engage and didn't talk about it and didn't kind of hash that out, that's why we're all here. And so no hard feelings or anything like that. Like, that's why you're there. So I could kind of, shoot for the fences. And if you guys, we're not comfortable with that, you're doing your job. So thank you. And the other thing is we, take pride in what we do and being on the forefront. And I've had several people claim to me that my numerous appearances in local media and stuff like that recently is my attempt to get headhunted by some other municipality, to which I always go, no thanks. Maybe if they pay me by the alderperson or something like that, because of how much additional stuff that you would have to put up with. So I'm really happy with what we're doing here and where we're going. And that's a little bit of what I'm going to talk to you about today, just a brief update because we're already going a little bit long. These are our municipal complaints, some stuff that's been on here quite a few times before with the Knights Inn and Spring Street, as well as Warwick Way, and then several complaints along Meadow Lane Avenue. I've went ahead and addressed several of those already. We also have, I think, about 6 cases in the court system still. They've been going very slow. Just saying that anything that comes to a citation that's being contested, I mean, I've had stuff in the system that has been in the system for a year and more. Yeah, and it's up to, once it goes in the municipal system, it's up to the judge. So that is all I can do to get that done. The sign permits, just one to report right now. We're seeing Crash Champions on Airline Road, which is going to be next to our Truck Education Center, and zoning compliance are Halyard Express on Washington Avenue. So that is actually supposed to say LPA 5. So I wanted to have something a little bit bigger and snazzier for you guys. However, the licensing issues with Photoshop in order to create some things to present for you guys have reared their ugly head, and I have not been able to put stuff together. However, I just wanted to give you a general update on how Local Area Plan 5 is going. The Community Development Department has recently upgraded to Microsoft 360. In which Sam and I have been able to have an easier time collaborating on aspects that we need to collaborate on. So one of those is local area plans. So we have files together, we can post comments back and forth, and most importantly, we can send gifts to each other now, which has increased department morale tenfold. But the main thing is that we've been working on aspects of Local Area Plan 5, which is here in the neighborhood. And I was just going to bring a couple of things that we are thinking on and considering. Since we're still kind of having in limbo the village-owned property right here, as far as, the tourism center and stuff like that. So one of the amendments that we're possibly considering is to potentially open that up to potential mixed use, civic, or other kind of uses, that you could get necessarily like the tourism center and then something else as well. And that would possibly help defray the ginormous amount of costs. We've been considering that. We do have a sort of completed, and what I wanted to show you, a completed design for Campus Drive that goes all the way to Fancher. That's one of the things that we've done with TID money. And just general updates to the master plan. So we think, in general, our zoning code is great. And the amount of zones that it gives us, and gives us the flexibility to have lots of different types of development. The current plan, the master plan, is pretty much the polar opposite of that, in the fact that when you have good planners like, I'm not to our own horn, but good planners like us, we can sort of take advantage of the flexibility that the master plan, or the vagueness that the master plan gives us, but we could use a little bit more clarity from time to time. So we're looking at potential new master plan designations for this particular area, so that it would be basically a village center or, you know, a village campus kind of area, to designate that a mix of uses, perhaps, you know, massing standards, as well as that certain types of businesses be okay, and whatnot. So if that's kind of vague, that's what master planning is. But it's more to kind of designate this area to take special consideration for what comes in here as far as density, value, and walkability, and would also include design standards for those kind of things. That's what shows up in comp plans and local area plans. You know, whether or not we want to have stricter design standards or walkability or trees or something like that within this zone. And that's one of the things that we are considering. I also presented to you the high development opportunity zone, which is a combination of kind of the area around the Amtrak station. And what that essentially is kind of a minimum density or intensity zone, saying that if someone wants to come in with the single family ranch house on the 50 acres, that we say no. And we'd rather have the opportunity than a limited use. So that's what that sort of designation would do. Yeah, that's pretty much what we have been kind of thinking about and running under. Other kind of sort of uses and changes in the master planning would be there's going to be potentially housing developments that kind of would circle Campus Park on the opposite sides, sort of. I would have loved them to be all facing in towards Campus Park, but unfortunately, you know, you don't always get that. But those are kind of ideas of development and increasing density and intensity. The other thing is that over here, the Vanguard development, they're finishing up their clubhouse. This particular area plan would, you know, sort of push them in a particular direction of where they want to go with the rest of their property. And speaking aside, we talk to developers every day, you know, that are interested in coming to Mount Pleasant because of the staff, because of the administration and the boards and commissions, and the things that we've been able to achieve here have been great. You know, you don't necessarily hear it, as you're saying, you don't hear it in the media that much, but they look at the bottom line of, you know, 10% growth for 2 years in a row. You know, hey, I need to pay attention to Mount Pleasant. And I've gotten that in, you know, in other aspects, because if you don't know, I'm the Southeast Wisconsin representative for the American Planning Association. So I get to toot Mount Pleasant's horn throughout the state quite a bit and saying what we've been able to do here. And to say that people are impressed is underselling it. They say, oh, wow, I didn't know. We need to, you know, pay attention to that. So we're getting some bites, and I'm really excited about things that are coming forward. And this local area plan is probably where it's all going to start. So it's led development and growth within Mount Pleasant for the last 10 years. And so it makes all the more sense to focus on it on the next 10. Unfortunately, I just wish we had the Amtrak station. You know, if any of y'all know if Sturtevant wants to bargain, you know, we could trade them the 80 acres for the Amtrak station. I would love to do it. Just being aside. So you guys, have any questions or thoughts about, you know, master planning and local area planning for this particular area? Let me know. You could say it now, or any particular, like, if you guys know if you want form-based stuff or design kind of stuff. Typically, Sam and I don't like governing aesthetics, because it can get into nitpicking about colors. I don't know, not all of you guys were here the last time we had a issue about paint colors come to the Plan Commission, but it is not necessarily super fun. But in certain instances, in order to have a cohesive sort of area that identifies as a place, sometimes they are pretty handy. So I wouldn't necessarily be qualified to do a design guide, but we could go out and seek that sort of thing. So any questions on that? And just a kind of an update on where we are. And then the next step would obviously to sort of, you know, send out stuff to the public to kind of get some feedback on what they think and general opinions, do you like trees or do you like sidewalks, stuff like that. Not do you like this particular development behind your house, because we always know what that answer is going to be. Yeah. Ron.
I have two questions. Number one, easy one. The complaint that you presented, the municipal complaints, I saw a couple of them were blighted property, like nights in. Are these a complaint by the citizens, or are these a complaint filed by the village to the property owners? For example, on the Oaks Road, nights in blighted property. So
we get citizen complaints. On very rare occasions, we get complaints that are basically filtered through the trustees to us, and we basically take them as if they're made by the trustees themselves.
Okay, so
if I do see something on my own, I go about that if it's glaringly obvious or above the board kind of deal. But I don't usually try to pick out certain things to.
I guess what caught my attention is what kind of complaint is that against Nights Inn, for example, as a blighted property?
Oh, trash.
Trash.
Their trash enclosure is completely dilapidated and looks terrible, and it blows. I mean, since the last month has been so windy and stormy, like I've gotten so many complaints about trash enclosures being blown open, about trash being blown to neighboring properties and whatnot. And let's just say that I wish Mount Pleasant 25 years ago was as strict about getting trash enclosures as they are today. Because if the Warwick Way one, the trash is just encircled with a chain link fence that doesn't even go all the way down to the pavement, and it doesn't have any closing on the top or anything like that, so the trash just blows out. And you could see it all over the place. So we can only enforce things going forward, and make recommendations to improve that if you want us to get out of your hair. But those are concerns that we're looking into. So
Okay. And my second question is for Sam, maybe. So you're talking about strategic planning and master planning. Can you give us a little update? What was that project, I think about 1 year ago or 2 years ago, where the UWM students had a graduate project? I am still very interested to find out that gets implemented or included in a plan, because, I'm just curious if you know what's the status of that.
Yeah, we're working on it. Unfortunately, the development out there is really picking up with the Leo development that you previously saw. So what we end up doing when there's development in an area where we're working on the plan is kind of setting the plan to the side a little bit and focusing on making sure that the development comes through in a way that basically sets up the rest of the plan to do so. So that's why on that Leo development, we talk so much about public roads and setting up adjacent properties and things like that. So really the last 6 to 8 months, that's been our focus on taking that UWM plan and just kind of using that local area to help that Leo development go through the process and set up the rest of the area. Once that starts construction this summer, we kind of wrap up development agreement, everyone signs on the dotted line. We'll be able to transfer back towards the wider area. So it's not dead. It's still hanging out there. It'll probably be the next one after Area 5 that you see come through the door. But we just had to shelve it for a while when we had an application, a pretty large application in the direct area that we were working on. So
Thank you.
If you want to take any, comparisons, like, Sam and I have taken this upon ourselves, and it's stuff that's on the back burner keeps on getting punted because we get a lot of development. We're fairly busy.
Sure.
There's a lot of stuff going on. But we notice it throughout the community. I live next door to Wauwatosa, and their last update for their comp plan was in 2008. And they just haven't been able to update it. So you're required legally to update it every 10 years. And we even have that situation too, where the county, Racine County, is supposed to lead and do an updated comp plan, but the city has also said they're going to go off and do their own. So we're at kind of an impasse to well, what do we do? Like and kind of waiting on the county to do those, because we would like to update our comp plan as well, hopefully incorporating some of our local area plans into it. But these things, take time and take some organization, and, we're not going to lead the charge, so to speak. It's not necessarily what we're supposed to be doing. Yeah, that's about it from me. I know that was kind of rambly and whatever, just giving you an update on these kind of things that they're going on, and there's a lot going on.
Thank you.
Yeah, every one of those developer calls is like, 30 to 45 minutes talking about what ifs and stuff, and your day just disappears.
Could you just give us a 2-minute update on Highway 31, state of Wisconsin, laying
Okay.
out those lanes and whether or not they adopted the Robin Palm Memorial Bike Path?
Well, WisDOT certainly knows who I am from certain things. If not that, then talking to them about the Stadium Freeway. But whole project is on hiatus. The last we heard about it, they went back to re-examine the scope. And in engineering terms, that is basically saying that they probably don't have enough money or funding or will to push forward in the current iteration. Now, the proper response for us is like, well, if you're re-examining scope, can you invite us to the table and so we can determine what your scope is? No, that's not going to happen. But that is sort of where that whole process is. And I would like for it to alter, because as we have been doing stuff with TID 6, and we have a proposed build out for Oaks Road, and for Oaks Road to connect all the way up to Durand, that would probably resolve quite a bit of traffic off of 31 if there's another north-south connector through the county. Unfortunately, it's hard to get. You can't ask for traffic modeling on demand or anything like that from Sewer Pack. You have to have, it's complicated, but that's where it is. It's in scope. So I've been asking them about it, that they don't know. I think they've even changed project managers on that particular project, but not really sure. They're also busy on, I think 20 they're updating, as well as they have a update plan for 32 at the Kenosha border around there. So they're doing a lot. Any other questions?
Robin, this is a personal comment. Earlier this week, 3 of the trustees, myself, Denise, and Anna Marie, went through the new Aurora Hospital and everything. And too, you guys have been out there and everything. And too, Lisa just invited us to come out. It is absolutely amazing as far as what they have out there and everything. And too, if you had an opportunity to go through the Foxconn display a few years ago out by the interstate, when they had the dummy in there, electronic and everything, well, they have one there, and they've got people who are teaching over there to work on this, they had for the Foxconn one too. But the whole facility out there is amazing. Shades will come down automatically when the sun hits the windows in some places. All these other different things around there and everything then too. It is state of the art. It is really, really amazing, and we can be proud of the fact that they chose Mount Pleasant to come to and to be in and everything, and they are also very happy then too.
Yeah, we're very excited about them and how forward thinking and sort of state of the art they are.
I mean,
Sam
you
was
guys-
talking to me about it.
Yeah, Sam and everything was included, but as far as the other day, that was amazing, other than it was snowing pretty hard when we left.
I know how it's basically sort of a tech show for Epic integration, all the Epic software and whatnot integrating into state-of-the-art patient care and transferring so everybody knows what you're allergic to, what your situation is at any given moment. They don't have to wait on fax machines or anything like that to fax your medical records over. We're really excited about that, and very positive of that being a development that anchors the nearby residential development with the Leo property and other adjacent things that are up for sale for residential unit. So now we have our new nurses and doctors and stuff like that. They have a place to live right nearby, and they can bike to work, or they can walk to work, or even just, if they're really lazy and it's snowing real hard, they can take a real short drive. And we want to build on that, and we think it's been super great. So thank you for adding that. All right. Thank you very much, y'all.
Thank you. Want a motion? Yes, sir.
Move for adjournment.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you for your patience and diligence.